Three, two, one, go. Welcome back to the weekly podcast. And I'm your host of the Daily Dope brand. All right, having some technical issues, but we're going to try this anyway. For the last week or so, I've been kind of not here, and there's been a lot of stories, and that's kind of what this is going to be. I remember the weekly podcast was necessary to start doing because there was so many stories about things going on legalization wise, and of course, those stories are pretty much done. Nobody's legalizing marijuana in 2017. That's just a fact of life. They've tried it legislatively, and they've tried it. Well, that's really the only way they've tried it. There is a ballot initiative circulating around in certain states that would put it on the ballot in 2018. But that's kind of it. In 2018, there's also a governor's races where a lot of governors are looking like pro-marijuana. Not governors, but, people that are running for governor. And these are obviously in states where there's still prohibition. And other states that are medical marijuana states, or states that have tried to legalize, like Arizona and New Jersey. So you got a lot of promising players out there running, like, for example, Ben Jealous is running in New Jersey. He's pro-marijuana legalization, and for the right reason. A lot of people talk about minorities in America being oppressed, and a lot of people also talk about the violent interactions that police have with these minority communities. But instead of focusing on the drug war being the root of that problem, everybody wants to go after everything else around the problem. And it is a systemic problem. And the thing about it is it has become like a situation where the police are some kind of invading, occupying force. And, they're almost rabid dogs when it comes to going after drugs. And you see the corruption involved in that, and how drugs are used loosely as a means for the police to basically to take their enemies down. And then, you've seen it in Baltimore, you've seen it in other places where was that even Baltimore that was where we just seen that exposed, where the police were actually caught on camera planting drugs 3 times, I think it was total. We can do better, man. We can focus on getting rid of the drug war. The drug war is what gave the police this extra power to where they have to have military might, because of the drug war, you have this huge black market that has to provide, heroin and meth and coke and crack and marijuana in some cases in a lot of states still. These black markets are fucking dangerous, man. They're dangerous in every way, shape, or form. They're so dangerous, they make it dangerous for police to enforce marijuana laws. They're so dangerous that, there probably wouldn't be half the people in prison today if it wasn't for the drug war's violent side, the drug war's intimidation side, the drug war's desperation side for the low-level drug dealers. And then you got, obviously the corruption is a big player in this. Like the police are almost like gangsters themselves. We've seen case after case of police doing stuff like stealing drugs from the locker, all the way, the evidence locker, all the way back in Dearborn when the cops made the brownies and then called 911 on themselves because they thought they were going to die after they ate a couple brownies stolen out of the evidence lab. evidence locker. And then we have cops stealing out of the evidence locker, selling the drugs through confidential informants who apparently they don't never get to go to prison. They just get to rat out everybody else. And in a lot of cases, you'll see someone get picked up for heroin and then they'll be used as a confidential informant to bust somebody for marijuana. It's the oldest trick in the book. The drug war is a war against marijuana first and foremost. We're seeing that time and time again. Like in northern Michigan, what I just said happened. Somebody got picked up. They had a heroin charge and they became a confidential informant and made some marijuana buys at a dispensary from Don Koshmider. Yeah, that's part of the evidence that they use to put you in jail for marijuana. And what is the point of this intro? Is that the drug war is the cause of this shit. Ben Jealous knows that. He's not running on a platform to legalize marijuana to pay, to fill this giant tax loop, this big black hole in the tax system in New Jersey because Chris Christie gave all of his big business friends and his billionaire buddies tax breaks. I mean, basically tax giveaways too. I mean, he's giving them shit. And because of that giant hole in the budget, a lot of people talk about, oh, marijuana, we can tax it and it can help this giant hole in the budget. I don't believe in that. I believe that if you want to tax marijuana, you can do that and you can do things with that tax. And you can figure out how not to tax it back into the black market and all that shit. But no, taxing marijuana is not going to cover these fucking holes in the budget. Like in Michigan, our governor, fucking Rick Snyder, gave his billionaire buddies tax breaks and his big business tax breaks. And the right wingers applaud that shit. I don't know why. My amp is totally toast, so I hope this is recording. You give them $1.5 billion in tax breaks. That's every year. And then you wonder why the roads ain't getting fixed quick enough. You're wondering why we can't afford pensions for firemen and teachers and shit. People that were promised shit already are getting their shit taken away. Like, oh, sorry, or cut in half, or cut down to like not even worth mentioning numbers. So Ben Jealous sees that. And these other governors, I might mention a couple of them here and there throughout the next few months. I'm sure as the gubernatorial races approach, we will be hearing a lot more about some of these races, whether it be because of the marijuana support or whatever the fuck else. All right, on with the damn show. In international news, this kind of shenanigans is what I don't understand. I mean, I understand it. I totally get it. There's people in the big, cloud of people that actually run shit. We call them the elite or we call them the owners or whatever you want to call them. The secret, dark, smoky room full of fucking shady people. You can kind of guess who's some of these players are, like the billionaires involved, like Soros. And I mean, when you talk about Soros, people say Soros is how Uruguay has this weed to sell everybody. Like he had all these farms grow the fuck out of some weed while they were busting people for growing weed still. And then all of a sudden, this is a couple years after the program was, where the law was passed to say it was legal. Now they finally got it to where you can just go to a pharmacy and buy it. People say that's Soros shit going on, like he did it all. I don't know how true that is. I didn't really do any looking into that, so I can't really weigh in on that. But also what you have on the other side, on the flip side of that, is the bankster mafia that basically runs the world. And these are the big banks in the U.S., and they all have to answer to the centralized bank, which is the Federal Reserve in America. Europe has their own central bank. And then there's the World Bank. And we can talk about banksters and all this shit all we want, but what we got to do here is look at what they're doing and say, well, okay, that's kind of a bigger picture than what's going on the fucking ground. So back in, I don't know, it was probably like 10 years ago or not even 10 years ago, a big bank, one of the biggest banks in the world, the BCCI, got in trouble, or it's called HSBC is what the new name became, and I think it's still called HSBC or some kind of a derivative of that name. Oops. But yeah, that's what happens when your amp's not working. So that bank got caught laundering money for not only Al Qaeda, which is, as far as I know, in international law, that's a terror. Doing business with a terrorist is basically you can get charged for being a terrorist. Like you've seen all these banks after 9/11 get raided because, the government said they were supplying money to terrorism, and sometimes it might have been true, sometimes it might not have been. But anyway, it happened. But HSBC, they didn't get in trouble for that. Guess who else they were laundering money for? The Mexican drug cartels. They were laundering billions of dollars for the Mexican drug cartels. Bosses like El Chapo, I think they were actually laundering money for El Chapo. And nobody got charged. The bank still exists. They didn't even get fined. And nobody got fired. Yet, on the other side of the coin, here they are, basically putting the brakes on Uruguay's marijuana program. So I'm going to read this, and yeah, this is fucking crazy. The pharmacies selling pot were doing a brisk business after Uruguay became the first country in the world to fully legalize marijuana sales for recreational use last month. Some of the pharmacies struggled to keep up with demand. Then came a stern letter from American banks. The letter immediately sent officials in Uruguay scrambling to make sense of the Patriot Act and other American laws that could doom an essential part of their country's new marijuana market. Now remember, the Patriot Act was around when HSBC got caught with their fucking money in the cookie jar. And nothing happened to nobody. That just went completely like, oh, guess what? No one's going to get charged, no fines, no nothing. What the fuck? It doesn't make sense, man, and it's not fair. They're doing a disservice by acting like they can't turn their head, like basically with them still fucking with Uruguay, it's like saying that, oh, we can't use discretion. We have to go after, we have to basically follow the rule of law no matter what. Even though we clearly see that what they're doing is not like organized crime, and it's actually the opposite, and it's actually helping root that shit out. So we can let that go. Somehow they say that they can't do that in this case, but they fucking did it in the HSBC case. Unbelievable, man. American banks, including Bank of America, said they would stop doing business with banks in Uruguay that provide services for those state-controlled sales. Afraid of losing access to the American banking system, Uruguayan banks warned some of the pharmacies over the last couple of weeks that their accounts would be shut down, potentially signaling a broader international impasse as other countries, including Canada, set out to legalize marijuana. Quote, "We can't hold out false hopes," President Tiberi Vázquez of Uruguay told reporters this week, adding that his administration was trying to come up with a solution. The snag mirrors challenges that such businesses have faced in American states that have legalized medical and recreational cannabis under the Patriot Act, which passed weeks after the attacks of 9/11. And by the way, if anybody is unfamiliar with the Patriot Act, you should definitely Google that. It's anything but patriotic. All the people that signed it, the Congress and the Senate and all that, they weren't even allowed to read it. They were just like handed it, hey, we need to pass this for fucking security for the United States, or we're under attack. Straight up, so just sign it. And also, one more note about the Patriot Act is the speed at which it was produced. I mean, this thing was already written. Come on, man. It was passed weeks after the attacks because it was written before the attacks even happened. And this thing gave powers to banks and everybody else that they never had before. And it took the rights away from you like it never has happened before. Took away, I mean, this thing is such a big violation of the Fourth Amendment that I could do about a 2-hour show just about that. Anyway, it is unlawful for American financial institutions to do business with dealers of certain controlled substances, including marijuana. Now, when you say that and you say Patriot Act, Well, HSBC is located in Britain or whatever, so they don't this doesn't apply to them because it says American financial. Well, at the same time we passed the Patriot Act, their right wing government at the time over there did the same fucking thing. It wasn't called the Patriot Act, but it was something similar, and nobody really read it. They didn't debate it. It just went up for a vote, and they voted for it, and it had the same things in it. Why did it have the same things about banking and money laundering and drug trafficking and shit in it? Because that shit was already written way ahead of time, and it wasn't written in America. It was written in that secret boardroom with the smoke and the fucking dark figures that I was talking about earlier. The same people that run everything, the fucking banksters. So the Obama administration indicated in 2014 that banks were unlikely to face penalties for offering services to marijuana businesses in the states where the trade is legal as long as they screened accounts for signs of money laundering and ensured customers followed state guidelines. That didn't change anybody's minds, and there was even, stuff written on paper with signatures and shit, and not too many banks actually ever decided to do any business with any cannabis businesses. This enabled some of the businesses to get accounts from credit unions. Major banks have largely stayed away from the expanding industry, concluding that the burdens of risk of doing business with marijuana sellers are not worth the hassle. So it's more worth the hassle than for you guys just to fight it at every turn and maybe try to, back the side that profits from cannabis being illegal, like the drug cartels. You're making so much money laundering the drug cartels' money and getting away with it that you don't even care about the legitimate cannabis money until you see the break-even line, and then the cannabis industry is going over the break-even line. So according to that theory, which is probably how it works, we still are seeing a lot of black market cannabis coming in from drug cartels. Several pot businesses in states like Colorado and Washington have opted to remain cash only, and that's you don't see a whole lot about that being a problem, but the people that have to deal with that every day, it is a fucking problem. Finding a workaround in Uruguay may be hard. Sales of marijuana represent a small share of business for pharmacies, which are currently the only merchants licensed to sell it, and the pharmacies say they need banking services to operate. Similarly, bankers in Uruguay will probably find it much more important to remain in the good standing with American financial institutions than preserve the accounts of a small number of pharmacies. My solution, write a new law that says that cannabis can be sold at cannabis-only stores. Why not? I mean, if everybody wants to be like, oh, I don't want nothing to do with that stinking bunch of garbage over there, then don't let them be involved in it. The threat of losing their banking accounts and some roughly 15 pharmacies that initially signed up to participate in the new market to give up on marijuana sales, says Pablo Duran, a legal expert in the Center of Pharmacies in Uruguay, a trade group. 20 other pharmacies that were expected to join the market are holding off while the government explores solutions. The American regulations are counterproductive, supporters of the legal market in Uruguay contend, because they may inadvertently encourage and not prevent illicit drug sales. Hello? I mean, the black market players are definitely lining up right about now. Fighting drug trafficking was one of the main reasons the Uruguayan government gave for legalizing recreational marijuana. Officials spent years developing a complex regulatory framework that permits people to grow a limited supply of cannabis themselves or buy it at pharmacies for less than the black market rate. Lawmakers hoped that the legal structure would undercut illicit marijuana cultivation and sales. Quote, there probably isn't a trade in Uruguay today that is more controlled than cannabis sale. Pharmacies in Uruguay were incredulous to learn that their bank accounts could be shut down, considering the years of study and planning that preceded the start of retail marijuana sales last month. The country's marijuana law was passed in 2013. Quote, we can't understand how the government didn't have the foresight to anticipate this, said Gabriel Bashini, a pharmacy owner in the coastal city of Colonia. Since sales began, the number of registered buyers in Uruguay has more than doubled. As of August 15th, more than 12,500 people have enrolled in the system that verifies customers' identities with fingerprint scanners and allows them to buy up to 40 grams per month. So all the people that say that George Soros was behind this Uruguayan marijuana pharmacy thing, there might be something to that because this sounds pretty gangster. You have to give a biometric, identifier, which is a fingerprint. You have to do that. So now you're in a database with your fingerprint in there. Pretty weird. I mean, I can't see how you can take that into a bad place. It's just people that, oh, these people definitely smoke weed. Big fucking deal. So then there's always these people that are like, well, when the roundup happens, they're going to round up the people that smoke weed, and they got your fucking fingerprint right there. There's never going to be a roundup like that, man. First of all, that roundup shit, like what happened with the Jews in Germany, I don't think that shit is ever going to happen again under any circumstance for any reason. And if we let it, then, I mean, that's how stupid people are. I mean, we've let a lot of dumb things happen, and it looks like we're having a really hard time fighting any of the dumb shit that's happening in Washington or in Lansing or anywhere else where the fucking government is basically crushing us. And I'm talking about the people in the marijuana world. There's just too much shady shit in power running shit. And these banks are proof positive that they can shut shit down no matter how good you have it running. So, yeah, you can get your 40 grams a month by giving up your fingerprint at a price of about $13 for 10 grams, enough for about 15 joints, advocates say. So that's a pretty good price. I haven't heard anything about the quality. Under the law, only Uruguayan citizens and legal permanent residents are allowed to buy or grow marijuana. So who's growing all this weed that's getting sold in the pharmacies, I wonder? Is that, again, is that Soros or whoever the fuck? I mean, it's got to be somebody. Somebody's got to be somebody with a lot of money, or the Uruguayan government has been doing this for a while and they figured out how to produce that much cannabis. As far as I know, when Uruguay's black market was in full force, Paraguay was the ones supplying it. Maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. I used to have a roommate that was from Uruguay, and he would tell me about some of these things, but I don't know. Demands have been very strong, Bacchini said. People are thrilled that they no longer have to go to private homes or venture out into the neighborhoods to get marijuana. In an emailed statement, the Treasury Department said that their earlier guidance was still being applied, but banking and legal experts say the Trump administration has yet to lay down clear markers on this area of policy. He can't even keep Sessions under wraps, man. Trump's pretty much a fucking failure. Officials in Uruguay are hopeful that American lawmakers will pass legislation allowing banks to do business with marijuana sellers in states and countries where it is regulated. Representative Ed Palmatier, Democrat from Colorado, introduced a bill in April that would do that, but marijuana advocates say they do not expect prompt legislative change. Quote, it is ironic that laws aimed at fighting drug trafficking and money laundering have created a roadblock for a system that intends to do just that, said Hannah Hetzer, an analyst at the Drug Policy Alliance, which supports decriminalization of marijuana. Uruguay is creating a legal market that displaces the illicit marijuana market. And yeah, one last word from the pharmacies. This guy says, he's been around for 30 years and he's just going to stop with the weed until they figure this shit out. I can't blame him for being a little bit fucking nervous. Over to the state side. Again, I think I did a story about this, an actual clip on its own, but I just reminder, I guess, if you haven't already gone over there, over here at soliciting public comments at the FDA. You don't have to be any kind of an expert. And I highly encourage you that if you are going to write the letter, if you look at the 2,098 public comments that are already there, you'll notice that there is a pattern. There's a lot of form letters being shot over there without any kind of adjustments to them at all. And that's fine, because what they have like a bot that will sort that shit out, I'm sure. I mean, I used to work in database management. So yeah, there's probably something that's going to sort all those out. And then it'll be like, okay, there was like 500 of these. that said this, and then they'll have, hey, these that said this, but somebody added a paragraph or a line, or they adjusted a couple things, and they have to read those. So, somebody's sitting around reading them, they're going to get hit with a lot of the same ones, and that's fine. But if you do really have something real to say, take a moment and actually write it out, because they're going to read these. And believe me, I've probably read a couple dozen of them now, because it's not hard to go through and find the original content, the ones that, see, like, this one's also, there's like 2 or 3 different form letters that I found. So I think one was from Normal and somebody else had one. I mean, whatever, that's irrelevant. Just get over there if you have any experience with CBD and talk about it, because there's no negative experience can be mentioned. I've not seen anything but positive, and when I say positive, I mean life-changing shit. And then there's the form letters, which are all very informative and very good. So, yeah, I highly recommend people to go over to the FDA's. I will leave a link in the description again. Make sure I do that. Yeah. And so there. I will not do that. So anyway, go over there, tell them about your CBD experience. Let's get that number up. If you remember what happened when the FDA asked, or the DEA asked for comments on Kratom, we stopped them from moving Kratom to Schedule 1 with these comments. So don't act like, it's, all them form letters and they're just going to throw all that shit away. What's the point? Why should I vote? Well, here's why. Because they're not asking for experts only. They said anybody that has experience with CBD. It's gonna matter. It's gonna make a difference. So I highly recommend that anybody watching this go to the FDA's public comment section. It's not hard to do. I was gonna do one right here, but I feel like I don't really have time. I don't have it prepared. I already did submit one comment, and you can submit more than one comment if you have to. Sometimes there's more than one thing to say about it, and I recommend that if you have like your own story and then you're going to do somebody else's story, just do it in 2 separate comments. Why not? Let's get the number up. All right. And then, yeah, when you hit that button, it's quite simple, really. You get the comment area. You can even add a file if you have some kind of data to back up your claims or whatever, and then you fill this out. And then when it gets to the category, you do have to do it. Organization name can be anything you want to say, or, don't even have to be anything. It is required, though. And so is this category thing. And if you notice in the category area, there is individual, public citizen. That basically covers anybody that doesn't fit into any of these other categories. So as long as you do all that, you'll be able to hit this button here and add to the 2,000 plus that have already made comments. And the deadline is the 13th of this month, which is, 10 days. So if you haven't already done it, get on it. Oh, shit. I think I just shut down one of my, oh no, that's already there. All right, anyway. In other news, AAA, the insurers, have again, and this is the 3rd story I've done about these guys, or I've talked about them 3 times now. We did a little thing where you can send them a letter, and then here's another one where you can do it again. And basically, they have received thousands of comments again. And it's from people saying, what the fuck are you talking about? So first, we would like to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of you who responded to Normal's request to contact American Automobile Association and urge them to stop lying about marijuana legalization. Thank you very much. But even as public and media pressure grows, the AAA affiliates are doubling down on their reefer madness rhetoric. At a recent AAA Texas-sponsored event, attendees were falsely told that drivers testing positive possess a 25-fold risk of accident compared to sober drivers. Oh, come on, man. If that was the case, this wouldn't be something that just started spiking in legal states. It would be happening all the time, and you'd be fucking that much more afraid to go out on the road, because not only would there be a drunk driving situation where people are crashing into everybody because they're drunk, but then there would be all these stone drivers, because the same amount of people smoked weed before the fucking legalization than do after. Almost identical numbers. So this is absurd to say that there's some kind of 25-fold. That means you have a 25 times more chance of crashing if you're on marijuana, if you smoke weed. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Weed doesn't impair you like alcohol, and it doesn't make you fall asleep at the wheel like fucking Vicodin. But the actual study cited by AAA concluded nothing of the sort. Rather, the study in question, conducted by the U.S. National Traffic Safety Administration, determined that THC-positive drivers possess virtually no statistically significant risk of motor vehicle accident compared to drug-negative drivers. I believe I pulled that up last time I talked about this. And it's, come on, man. You got to be sincere about what you're talking about, because if you're giving people fucking false information, you're not helping anything. You're not advancing anything. Similarly, AAA Mid-Atlantic is continuing to distort the truth about cannabis, despite having provided with peer-reviewed evidence to the contrary. A recent reply by the Director of Public and Government Affairs Office shows that the agency is refusing to listen to the facts with regard to cannabis regulation and traffic safety. Quote, "We are deeply concerned that lawmakers are considering the legalization of recreational marijuana," the AAA response states. AAA opposes the legalization of marijuana for recreational use because of its negative traffic safety implications. Yet we still have never seen any of this evidence of this fucking bullshit he's talking about. Yet recent studies of federal crash data find that changes in the legal status of cannabis are not associated with the rise in traffic fatalities, and in some instances, regulating cannabis has been associated with reduction in deadly motor vehicle crashes. You might be like, wow, right after you smoke that, you've been stumbling a lot on them words there, buddy. Well, you know what? I've been stumbling on them words whether I was smoking or not my whole life. Reading out loud is a little bit tricky for me because I read really fast. I could read this whole page in like 2 seconds. But now I'm going to sit here and stumble through it, and that's just the way I read. So if you didn't like that about me, you probably wouldn't still be watching my channel. I'm pretty sure that's just as common as me sniffing my nose and clearing my throat. But I was accused of being monochromatic, and I don't think I am. I don't think it's monotone. If it is, man, maybe I should stop being such a Michigan person. But nonetheless, AAA does continue to opine the problem of drugged driving will only get worse if a state legalizes it for recreational use. There's nothing to back that up. Nothing ever. AAA further argues that a 2015 Governor's Highway Safety Report finds that drugs were present in fatally injured drivers with known test results appearing more frequently than alcohol. Whoa. That's just absolutely preposterous. Now, if he's talking about, willy-nilly, we tested for everything from caffeine to aspirin to marijuana to all pharmaceutical drugs, which is not, they don't do that. If you said that, and then you also included, which they did do, when you include alcohol, but there was other drugs involved, like alcohol and opiates, all of a sudden, that's just a drug driving situation. Forget the alcohol. And that's exactly how this report, the Governor Highway Safety Report, was a complete farce. But anyway, we'll read on. However, AAA fails to acknowledge that the Governor's report was primarily highlighting a risk in the presence of prescription medications and over-the-counter medications in fatally injured drivers. Like I said, if you look at it, it clearly says in the report that, anybody that has drugs in their system, that's going to be called a drug driving in that report. As acknowledged by the paper's authors, for this report, a drug is any substance that can impair driving. There are four categories of drugs: illegal drugs, legal non medical drugs, prescription medications, and over the counter medicines. So they were finding people with Advil, acetaminophen, whatever, boom, check, drug driving. Governor's report also fails to identify whether the drug positive drivers identified by the study were either impaired at the time of the crash or even culpable for the accident. So, again, like the other one that we looked at before, the high intensity drug trafficking area report, that one too, the same thing. They didn't really even, act like that one's even more nefarious, but they were like, okay, this person was in the car that got in a crash. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether that person was driving or not. They tested him. Oh, he tested positive for acetaminophen and he had a couple beers or something. Like they're spending a lot of money on these tests. And these people, like it just said, didn't even tell you whether or not the person was responsible for the accident. And they are talking about drivers, so we'll give them that. But all right, further, the governor's report has fallen under scathing public criticism from other traffic safety groups, including Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who publicly repudiated their interpretations. Quote, there is no way you can say that drugs have overtaken alcohol as the biggest killer on the highway. MAD responded, the data is not anywhere close to being in a way that would suggest that. They're correct. Specifically, a 2014 review of the U.S. fatal traffic accident data by researchers at the Pacific Research Institute in Maryland reported definitively that alcohol remains a greater contributor to crash risk than all other drugs combined, concluding alcohol was not only found to be an important contributor to fatal crash risk, it was also associated with fatal crash risk levels significantly higher than those for other drugs. The much higher crash risk of alcohol compared to that of other drugs suggests that the times of limited resources effort to curb drug driving should not reduce our efforts to pass and implement effective alcohol-related laws and policies. If we are going to achieve sane policy solutions in regard to cannabis reform, it is essential that we call out those who seek to deceive the public, even if we appreciate their roadside assistance. And you know what? A lot of people are finding that they don't appreciate the roadside assistance. In fact, a lot of times you don't even need roadside assistance because you're leasing a car and you already get roadside assistance with that. Other insurance companies offer better and cheaper insurance that includes roadside assistance. AAA, last time I checked, is the highest insurance you can possibly pay for anyway. So fuck them. I recommend anybody that listens to my show to just go ahead and boycott. I'm not a really big, I boycott things in my life just because I don't want to get that bad taste in my mouth when I drink some Nestle or some shit. Like, I really know that Nestle is a fucking piece of shit corporation that uses slave labor to make tea and shit like that. And, they're extracting billions of gallons of water from places like Michigan and California when there's people in those states that can't even get fucking fresh water out of their tap or use water to spray on their fucking dead grass. So, all bullshit aside, you should definitely cancel your AAA policy because they apparently aren't fucking interested in, real facts and real statistics and real science. They just want to really push their anti-marijuana propaganda like never before. So fuck them. And that's all we got to say about that. Real quick, Jeff Sessions week. It's not week, but segment. Seems like every week I can't get away with doing anything without having a Jeff Sessions story in it somewhere. So this time we're not sitting here trying to listen to your bullshit anymore, Sessions. There is no violent crime wave. There is nothing crazy going on. We don't need an emergency situation to fucking stop the opioid crisis or to stop cannabis or any of that shit because it's not fucking the way to do it. Quit treating drugs like there's some kind of a crime wave. If you legalize marijuana, then what? Crime goes down. We see that in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, everywhere else it's been done. The only crime still involved is when they fucking still want to kick people's doors in for arbitrary rule breaking of the marijuana policies, which should be a whole nother conversation that we're having, but nobody wants to have that one. We're going to do it later in the show, though. But yep, in Attorney Jeff Sessions' world, an explosion of violent crime is persistently bubbling just beneath the surface of American society, ready to spill forth onto the streets. Speaking to the National Association of Attorney Generals in February, Sessions noted recent jumps in U.S. crime rates and warned they represent, quote, a dangerous new trend that he believes, quote, is not necessarily an aberration, a ghost, aberrant. I don't know. His perception of looming crime outbreak can be traced to his unwavering belief that drugs inherently induce crime. Sessions author a foreboding piece for the Washington Post, in which he claims the federal government softened its approach on drug enforcement during the Obama years, and as a result, drug abuse and violent crime surged, downplaying the mass of the low-level drug offenders, roughly half of the federal prison population. He insists any nominally nonviolent offenders in prison are there solely because they were violent offenders who accepted plea bargains for their drug charges. Plea bargains of drug charges. No, because time and time again, you notice that people with even violent criminal offenses like armed robbery get less sentences, or even if they had the same sentence, do less time overall in prison for violent crimes. So that's total horse shit. No one's going to plead down to a fucking drug charge because they know that you're going to get a mandatory minimum or some kind of other reason why, like just because of the weight of how much of the marijuana you had with you or whatever other drug, all of a sudden you got these guidelines that say you got to be in prison for 20 years because it's like, give me a fucking break. No one's pleading down to drug charges. Numerous studies suggest Sessions is wrong on all these points. He may believe that all drug offenders are incorrigibly dangerous, but in a 2015 study that examined the federal inmate population determined, quote, over 3/4 of all individuals in federal prison for drug offenses have no serious history of violence before the current offense. Another report found that 39% of state and federal prisoners are incarcerated without public safety justification, as in nonviolent drug offenses. His claim that the softened approach to drug enforcement caused a violent crime surge under President Obama is also flatly untrue. From 2009 to 2014, overall crime fell to its lowest level since 1970, even while prosecutors scaled back the use of strict federal penalties. Finally, a new study from the Vera Institute, one of the foremost research organizations focusing on criminal justice policy, undermines his argument that recent increases in crime signal a dangerous trend. The study analyzed crime rates from 4 different groups, those with low, medium high, and high crime rates. It found that average rates of robbery, aggravated assault, and overall violent crime declined between 2014 and 16 for all 4 groups. Only that notable increases in the group average rates were for homicides that occurred in groups of jurisdictions that already had the highest pre-existing violent crime rates. The report states that given the sudden uptick in homicides and other violent crimes in the spring and summer of 2015, the default assumption became the new trend towards violent crime. However, the researcher notes that those assumptions were premature, as year-to-year crime fluctuations are normal, and that changes similar to those seen from 2014 to 2016 have occurred before. Those studies reiterate that the overall crime remains at historic low, and that the recent spike in violent crime was centered more in major cities where violent crime rates were already high. In fact, just 3 cities, Baltimore, Chicago, and Washington, accounted for half of the aggregate homicide increases from 2014 to 2015. In the following year, Chicago alone accounted for more than 40% of that national increase. Even within these cities, the majority of crimes occurred in just a few specific neighborhoods. In Washington Post article, Sessions warns that recent homicide uptick of 11% is the highest percentage increase in decades. But Vera Analysis explains that percentage changes in homicide can be especially volatile given their very low baseline and sample size. Kind of like when they say, oh, there's a 60% increase in drug driving or teen use or people taking their pets to the vet with overdoses and CDC emergency room visits and blah, blah, blah. All that shit is because the original number is like 10. So all of a sudden the number jumps to 14 and it's a 60% increase. Give me a fucking break. Ultimately, the analysis concludes that the recent rise in homicides in a few cities is troubling and requires localized interventions, but that it would be irresponsible to paint the situation as an imminent national crime wave. The problem is that Sessions' misguided beliefs about the nature and prevalence of crime informs his policy choices. Soon after his swearing in, the Attorney General rescinded a directive from the former Attorney General Eric Holder that guided federal prosecutors to avoid pursuing charges that would trigger mandatory minimums for low-level offenders. Holder's memo was intended to minimize prosecutions for drug offenders without extensive criminal histories in favor of pursuing criminals higher up the food chain. The strategy was working. The percentage of defendants who faced a mandatory minimum plummeted, while prosecutions of more serious crimes increased. For the first time in decades, prison populations fell in tandem with crime rates. Now, many nonviolent first-time offenders face the possibility of being stuck with a 10-year mandatory minimum charge when they otherwise would have gotten a slap on the wrist or been placed in a rehabilitation program. Prosecutors, on the other hand, will be splitting their resources between small fry offenders and the truly dangerous. Contrary to the Attorney General's imagination, hordes of bloodthirsty gang members are not suddenly plaguing American neighborhoods. Crime is still at the lowest level in decades. The role of the highest-ranking prosecutor is to present the facts, not to further an alarmist agenda. Yeah, well, I don't know if I see any possibility of Sessions coming around ever, but yeah, Sessions is still trying to blow smoke up your ass about this whole crime wave shit. We'll see how this pans out. I mean, this could just be the mantra for the next 4 years or more. You never know. Because as far as I know, the federal budget really does not have any money in it for some kind of a major crackdown on weed. There's no justification for them acting like they're going to just start arresting people for opioids either. So, I don't know. Good luck with all that. Three, two, one, and go. All right, and so speaking of the drug war and the fact that it's really a war on weed, essentially, and that all these resources are being used basically to prosecute weed offenders. And it's a worldwide problem, man. The United States is the worst at it, the offenders of it. So, and then you'll hear these prohibitionists and these Republican lawmakers and these pundits on Fox News and shit, like your Ann Coulter types, and they always got that same bullshit. Kevin Sabat says it too. Oh, we don't arrest people for simply possession. Yeah, we fucking do, all right? So quit giving me that horse shit. This is from the freethoughtproject.com. Now, you might have heard of them being fake news once again. And, you know, when I hear that shit, it just kind of annoys me because you can't call everything that someone does fake just because they push some fake shit here and there, whether it's on purpose or not. Anymore. Used to be called this thing called integrity. You know, like if you fucking lied one time and you're a piece of shit, no one's ever going to believe you anymore. But if you were found to be pretty much telling the truth about the things that really matter, then you were considered to be somebody that had some integrity. So these days, that there ain't nobody that has fucking integrity. There's nothing like that. Everybody's a sellout. And everything that you say is what you call the media or the news. They're going to have some good shit and they're going to have some bullshit. Even down to individual reporters. Like we was talking about Ali Belcher or something like that on MSNBC. Like he'll tell you the real deal on, single payer Medicare for all type healthcare system because he's from Canada and he's not going to bullshit you there. But, flip it around to a different issue and depending on who's paying his paycheck or what the issue is, like, he'll say something different. So you can, and it's just like anybody, any politician, you can, no matter what position you found them for that you thought was a good thing, you can probably rewind it back far enough and find them, stumping for the opposite side of that same issue. So don't give me anything about sources. If you want to know about sources, look at the source, look at the sources they're using, look at the data set that they're going by. See if there's any reason why there would be propaganda or sensationalism. So this is talking about some studies done in Ohio. Cops arrest more people for pot than all violent crimes combined. And then they blame the lack of resources on the whole problem with the, all the things going on with the drug war that they're not handling. Like murder rates going up and people solving them crimes and other crimes, property crimes going up and all this shit. Well, it's going up because the economy's going down. There's no economy in Ohio to speak of for the most part, for most people. It's just shit. You got your established people that work at established places, and then everybody else is just fighting over, the jobs that barely pay good. That's why the crime rates are going up, not because of drugs, not because of the drug war or any of that shit. And the resources for the cops, they're being used wrong. All right, let's read the article. Police in Ohio are blaming a lack of resources for the fact that unsolved homicide cases greatly outnumber the cases that are solved. Yet they seem to have the resources to arrest thousands of suspected cannabis users. No, that's just a simple fact, man. So the failed war on drugs is alive and well in the state of Ohio, where an average of over 20,000 people are arrested on charges of cannabis possession each year. While the Drug Policy Alliance reported that around 30,494 people are arrested for drug-related offenses annually, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws noted that the majority, or around an average of 20,453 arrests, are for cannabis possession and sales. While Ohio legalized cannabis for medical use in 2016, it has taken over a year for regulators to finally start, quote, to formalize how and where pot will be grown and available to medical patients, which means that patients will just now start to see a difference. Not really. However, despite the fact that they have seemed to have plenty of resources when it comes to arresting and detaining nonviolent offenders, police in Ohio are blaming a lack of resources for the fact that the number of homicide cases they solve continues to decline. According to a report from the Columbus Dispatch, while over 80 people have been murdered in Columbus, Ohio in 2017, police have made arrests in just 22 cases, with 5 cases being solved through exceptional clearance, which occurs when the killing was self-defense or suspect dies. This puts the city at 34% clearance rate for the year. So just 1 in 3 murders are getting solved, in case you couldn't figure that one out. Quote, it does appear homicide clearances are becoming rarer, Thomas Hargrove, chairman of the Murder Accountability Project, told the Dispatch. Quote, I'm afraid Columbus is joining a number of cities where most murders go unsolved. The homicide clearance rate is calculated by dividing the number of homicides that are cleared or have suspects that are charged by the number of homicides that are recorded. While the national average for homicide clearance rate was over 90% in the 1960s, it declined around 64% in 2015. And this is all because of Nixon's war on drugs, man. You create a big sinister, dark, black market where the people that run it are pretty much criminal thugs. Yeah, murder rates go up, solve rates go down, corruption increases. Sometimes these murders are just cops killing people, under the radar. Detectives cited in the report from the dispatch listed, quote, a lack of cooperation from witnesses and communities. Yeah, that's another side effect of the black market is you have these gangs running shit and no one's going to speak out against them. You're definitely not going to go testify in court that some gang sold your sister the heroin that killed her or whatever, like if you want to come down to the real deal shit. A double-digit spike in homicides, and then which only has tax limited resources, and the turnaround time at the lab as reasons for the declining clearance rate. Turnaround time at the lab. Again, it seems like they have a never-ending fucking budget when it comes to, hey, we need to send this weed off to the lab and test it, or and I've seen some fucking cops trying to test weed for everything from DNA genetics, to see if it had, the potency level of the THC. For whatever reason they wanted to know that. It really is irrelevant because they charge by the weight of whatever. You could have a fucking plant in a fucking planter with dirt and they'll weigh everything and call it all weed. So why the fuck should they care about whether or not it's like pure THC or not, But anyway, they spend the money and have the time to wait for those lab reports. Why do they all of a sudden, when it comes to solving a murder, we couldn't send our shit to the lab? Give me a break. Hargrove insisted that more homicides will be solved when there are more resources, mainly detectives. So again, you have plenty of people getting promoted all the time in Columbus and all these other shit cities in Ohio where they're like, oh yeah, if you want to be a detective, you can be a detective in narcotics, or you can be a detective here or a detective there. And homicide detectives are usually that's usually the retirement position or some shit. I don't know, man. It ain't like you see it on TV. Let's just put it that way. Everybody wants to be a drug detective. So that's what they're trying to say. They're struggling financially, and the detectives they do have are spread too thin as it is. Well, they're not spread too thin when you need to do an investigation on somebody that you don't like that has like a weed operation going. Then you have helicopter money to fly over with a FLIR. You get judges to sign off on all this shit. You investigate people's bank records and everything about them. This is all before you even bother to round up a crew and kick in a door. You have to investigate all this shit about somebody that you're about to raid. You somehow have all the money for that, but, oh man, we didn't have enough detectives to solve a murder case. That's sad. While there has been a recent increase in the murder rate in Ohio, the overall question remains, how did police in the United States go from solving over 90% of homicides in the 60s to around 60% today, with cities like Columbus solving as little as 30% of the homicides? It was not a change in the resources. It was the introduction of the drug war. Former President Richard Nixon. Now, I don't know why when somebody like Richard Nixon does something like this, why we don't just roll it back after we roll his ass up out of Washington. I mean, he's dead now. Probably laughing still that this fucking drug war is such a big ordeal. Here's what he said, though. Quote, America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. And, right there, since we know that all that is bullshit and that launching a fucking all-out offensive didn't work, hey, that was 1970. Did it work? By all measures, fucking no, it did not work. Why don't we just stop it then? Stop funding it, get rid of the DEA, scrap the CSA. It's all fucking bullshit. It's throwing a hammer at a problem that you need to address with some fucking baby gloves on. I have asked Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive. This will be a worldwide offensive dealing with the problems of sources of supply as well as Americans who may be stationed abroad. wherever they are in the world, whatever that means. It'll be government-wide, pulling together the 9 different fragmented areas within the government in which this problem is now being handled, and it will be nationwide in terms of new educational programs that we trust will result from the discussions we have had. Now, he's full of shit because the discussions he had ended up being the LaGuardia Commission, where they put together a thing about the drugs, and the thing that they said about marijuana was that this is the safest drug there is and there's no reason why it should be prohibited. Well, he scrapped that shit and went full on the war against weed. And his educational program was just another reefer madness reboot, and it led to things like DARE and all that shit in the 80s and the 90s. But his original kickoff was basically it almost like quadrupled the amount of money spent in the anti-drug efforts, or whatever you want to call it, the drug war. About quadrupled that shit in 1 year. And yeah, it's a failure. Why are we still doing it? However, the trend in Ohio has been a trend reflected in many states across the country. The war on drugs has turned into a war on cannabis. The majority of individuals arrested on drug charges have been arrested for possession or possessing a plant that has at least 86% of America's support legalizing in some form. And I believe that number is over 90 for medical marijuana now. So, I don't know why we're arresting anybody for marijuana. It's fucking completely harmless. Around the country, police make more arrests for drug possession than any other crime. An ACLU and Human Rights Watch report from last year, quote, more than 1 of every 9 arrests by state law enforcement is for drug possession, amounting to more than 1.25 million arrests every year. You want to know why the prison population is what it is? That's why. You want to know why minorities are being ridiculously targeted in this drug war, and why there's a prison disparage between population percentage of whites and blacks and the reflection of that in the prison system, even though it's pretty well known that just as many percentage of the white population uses drugs as the black population, which means that millions of more white people use drugs than black people. So how the hell is this all happening? Oh, it's the drug war. In fact, police make more arrests for marijuana possession alone than for all violent crimes combined. And there you go, Sessions, as we were saying a minute ago about how we don't know where you're getting these numbers from, as far as like how violent crimes have been like going crazy since Obama got in there and lightened up all the enforcement. Shut the fuck up, Sessions. You're so wrong on so many levels, and every time you keep this stupid ass like gung-ho approach to drugs alive, the more people die from overdoses. And it has nothing to do with marijuana. It's all to do with your bad drug policies. So good luck trying to fucking sleep at night, man. When somebody in your family dies from an opioid overdose, aside from caring more about arresting people for a plant than catching a murderer, cops also make arrests disproportionately among race. According to the report, in spite of whites and blacks using drugs at the same rates, black adults are arrested 250% more than their white counterparts for drug possession. Now, that's the arrest numbers. If you look at what people actually get convicted and then the subsequent incarceration numbers, they go down for whites even more every time, until the point where it's almost like nobody that's white even goes to prison for drugs. I don't want to say that because I know that's not the case. But it feels like it when you compare the numbers to, like, if you're black and you get caught, yeah, you're going to get convicted. And then if you get convicted, are you going to go to prison? If you're black, yeah. If you're white, not necessarily on those other two things. But I'm not going to say, blanket statements, because we all know somebody, no matter what race they are, that are in jail right now for this shit. The Free Thought Project has provided in-depth coverage of stories that show the true power of cannabis, such as the groundbreaking study published last month, which found cannabis can stop HIV from becoming AIDS. A study that confirmed that the majority of cannabis users gave up prescription opioid opiate medications, and a study that confirmed that cannabis has a significant effect on killing cancer cells. This is all real important shit that you should see on CNN or ABC or NBC or CBS or Fox News or MSNBC, whatever. Why the fuck aren't they talking about any of these studies? You ask them what's going on with medical marijuana, they're like, oh, I think we need more studies. That was the last memo I heard. Yeah, we need more studies on that. We don't know anything about it. As far as we know, it could be deadly. So, yeah, that's what you get from the mainstream, lamestream media, and that's why I think a lot of people fucking watch me. Because, like, you're not going to get these stories anywhere else in some cases, man. And that's why they call places like the Free Thought Project fake news. Because do you think Big Pharma wants you to know that, oops, not online. Big Pharma don't want you to know that shit. Sorry about that. I was going to go over there and, show you one of these stories. But, yeah, Big Pharma don't want you to know that cannabis users are throwing away their opiates left and right. They also don't want you to know that it's a fucking highly effective against cancer. Or HIV spreading or, becoming AIDS. Which basically means your immune system, it basically is a bridge between having HIV, which destroys your immune system and taxes it out on anything that you get, ailment-wise. So they don't want you to know that shit, guys. As a states like Ohio that the number of unsolved homicide cases greatly outnumber the cases that are solved, it makes you wonder, what more could they accomplish if they were able to use their resources to track down violent murder suspects instead of wasting them on nonviolent individuals who are found in possession of a plant? And for you people that want to keep running those talking points, ooh, you know what? I'm not online, so I can't do these videos. Let's see what happens. That just stopped it. And we are going to keep the screen capture rolling. We can cut this part out later. Dang. And I'm back. Line that up. Line it up. And then edit that shit. All right, I do got video, actually. I just got online. So here we go.
Every 25 seconds, someone is arrested in the United States simply for possessing drugs for their personal use. Around the country, police make more arrests for drug possession than for any other crime. Over 1.25 million arrests per year.
Corey Ladd is a 27-year-old man that got sentenced to 20 years for half an ounce of weed. No parole, no probation. Every single day in prison for 20 years for half an ounce of weed.
It's fucking
Massive
crazy.
numbers of arrests and aggressive prosecution for simple drug possession is ruining lives.
And I want that to sink in. 25. I mean, come on, man. This is ridiculous. You can't get that kind of a sentence for any violent crime unless it's murder.
And destroying families.
When Corey gets out of prison, Charlie will be about 18 years old. Hi, Corey. I was just talking about how you miss out on the little things of Charlie's life.
I definitely don't think it's fair whatsoever. I wasn't hurting anybody.
Drugs can be a felony offense. I met people who are prosecuted for tiny amounts of drugs, all for their personal use. Sometimes single doses, fractions of a gram, even residue in a pipe or an empty baggie.
It's true.
The sheer numbers of people that we arrest and send to jail for drug convictions is unbelievable.
Stephen is not here with us right now because He's in prison. Stephen have wrestled with a drug problem for some time now. The last time he was arrested, I think it was for like drug paraphernalia. So he went to court, and eventually they gave him 5 years.
5 years.
Stephen was, at one time, he was the provider. His not being there has definitely impacted, you know.
Blacks, whites, people of color, we all use and sell drugs at relatively the same rates. But we enforce our policies in these poor black and brown communities.
Up
That's
here you
where
have
the
this
arrest
ticker
occur.
while
That's
you're
where the
watching this.
unconstitutional
This
stops
how many
occur.
people have been
That's
arrested.
where most of our law enforcement shootings occur.
Despite equivalent rates of drug use, a black person is 2.5 times more likely than a white person to be arrested for possessing drugs. In some states, that's even higher. In Montana, Vermont, and Iowa, the ratio is 6-1. In Manhattan, a black person is 11 times more likely to be arrested for drug possession than a white person.
My client, she is looking at 20 to life for 0.5 grams of crack cocaine, which probably would be enough to get her high for maybe a day.
A lot of times when the urge and the thoughts came, I used because I've been on it for so many years, like over 30 years, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't know how to stay stopped.
What good is it doing us as a fucking society to put people like this lady in jail for fucking 15, 20, 10 year, what, you know, double digit, single, for one day, but let alone years. You just want to put these people away in warehouses and forget about them, and you're going to pay for them to be in there. What the fuck is the point of that? You know? And if somebody like this wanted a way out, there is no way out. We should have ways out, and there should never be criminal penalties for being a drug user, a drug addict.
In the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, and over
Possessing
the course of that time,
drugs.
any changes that have been made in that system haven't stopped her or helped her with her addiction in any way, I think is very telling.
Most people who use drugs never develop dependence, but for those who do, treatment should be available and affordable in the community.
That's true. But you don't have to be a drug addict to get caught with a little bit of drugs and ruin your whole fucking life or even end up in prison.
You shouldn't have to get arrested to get help. And the truth is, in most jails and prisons, the treatment isn't the kind of treatment they need.
Once you're incarcerated and you're convicted
Drugs are
of
available in
possessing
prison.
any drug, for instance, your life really goes downhill.
You start with your driver's license, your job, where you live if you're trying to get into public housing, voting, having custody of your children. The list goes on from there, but those are some of the most immediate social consequences and economic consequences from drug charges in a criminal context.
You can get over an addiction.
And they think that that's going to stop someone from doing drugs. Like, oh, I better not take this next hit. Or someday I'm going to end up in prison. It's not something, that's why this is a terrible deterrent. Like, oh, you fucked up, so you got to go to prison for years. I mean, it's not a deterrent. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, man.
But you'll never, ever get over.
And it's ruining the effectiveness of prison as being a deterrent, because if you go rob somebody, you know that you might not get, more than 5 years, and you probably be out in 2. You get caught with some fucking drugs and you might never get out.
Conviction. It will follow you for your entire life and prevent you from thriving, from succeeding.
That's
40
what they
years
want.
after the war on drugs was declared, rates of drug use have not gone down.
War on drugs is to
Instead,
keep people
countless people have been funneled into the criminal justice system
like
at enormous
as second
cost
class
to them,
citizens.
their families,
Pure and
and the
simple.
U.S. taxpayer.
These are people...
And, let's not make any mistakes about it. The people that made these laws originally, and Nixon and his clan, a bunch of racist fuckers. Because they knew that something like this, yeah, sure, it's going to suck if you're white and you get caught up in this drug thing and you go to jail or something. But they knew that this would be way worse for the fucking people of color. The minority communities would suffer way more at the, in the criminal justice system. That's all it is. These are racist policies. They always have been, and they still fucking are. And they're the worst thing going on. And people that don't want to point this out as to why people of color have this big like thing going, like a oppression against them. This is one of the biggest things going. I can't think of anything more oppressive to the fucking minority community than the war on drugs. Anybody that's fighting for people of color that act like this isn't a big issue, they're full of shit, and they fucking are doing everybody a disservice by not focusing squarely on the war on drugs as being the number one reason why people of color are oppressed today.
It could be very high, well-functioning members of society. They can be mothers and fathers. They can have great jobs out in the world and contribute, but instead they're just sitting in jail because nobody was willing to give them the time of day.
For no other thing other than doing drugs or possessing drugs.
It is not justice.
Or even selling a little bit. Big fucking deal.
Over and over again and expect a different result. So maybe we should try something different.
It is time to decriminalize the personal use and possession of all drugs. This means changing federal and state law. The human toll of criminalization
It is time.
out of.
All right, that's it for that. And you know, on that note, we're gonna get to Don in a second. But on that note, as we're talking about the arrests for drugs, Oregon, and this says some other states, but I don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, a bill signed by Oregon Governor Kate Brown on Tuesday makes personal use, possession of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and other drugs a misdemeanor, not a felony. That's all we need to do right there. Start fucking there. But this isn't far enough, as you're going to find out. Oregon joined a handful of other U.S. states to defelonize drugs under the new law, which is supported by law enforcement groups and takes effect immediately. Joe Meza, owner of Amazing Treatment, a rehab clinic in Salem, applauded the move, of course. A whole lot of talk about what that's going to do for her, but really, I don't know. Until you see these new rehab places popping up left and right, I don't understand. You can't get this to work without real rehabilitation places that someone can just walk right in. You don't have to get forced into one, and they don't cost anybody money, that needs the help. Because, what the fuck are you talking about? Some of the best treatment facilities to get people off of things like heroin and whatnot, they only work for the rich because you have to be rich to go there. To change classification of this behavior from a felony to a misdemeanor is tantamount to telling our school children that tomorrow it will be less dangerous to use methamphetamine than it is today, wrote Lynn County District Attorney Doug Martini. Martini, what a fancy name. He didn't like that plan, obviously. Well, you know what, dude? Right now you're telling your kids that we live in a complete fucking police state, and if you get caught with drugs, you're going to prison. That's just bullshit. Well, anyway, heading in the right direction, Oregon. And then when you're talking about people getting arrested in this drug war and marijuana and all that shit, there's something going on. This is going on, and I did a story about it last year about Jamaica and how, the heavily moneyed people in Jamaica are deciding whether or not to include the Rastafarians in the new legalized marijuana world that they're envisioning. More than likely, they'll do the same thing they do here and they're doing in California, as you can see right here. What's up with this? They act like that somebody that is part of the old system, like Don Koshmider in Michigan and others that have had their dispensaries raided. They're acting like these people are the enemy, that they're bad players, that they're, that they didn't do anything good or what. I don't even know. Obviously they didn't say that, but this is what's going on, man. They are trying to take it over. And when I say they, in almost every time these situations, what we're seeing is they are people that were the prohibitionists. Or in this case, a bureaucrat who was profiting from selling medical marijuana or a bureaucrat who's now profiting from selling marijuana, who was actually involved in the keeping marijuana illegal and keeping people going to prison for it. The Prohibitionists, they lost, but now they're like, oh, but wait, we will win because we can still arrest everybody that was doing this before, and then we can take it over. So we're the people that do the weed thing. And anytime someone sticks their head out trying to do it, we just take them out. So I did a story also last year about Don Koshmider in Michigan. And he finally got sentenced. And it was under the multiple marijuana charges that they gave him. There's not a whole lot of details in here, but I'm still kind of sorting this out, and I might do another story about it later on. I picked this bare bones article here because I don't know why, I guess so I could just talk about it rather than read all the stuff that they're going to say about it. They don't even tell you that his maximum was 15 years. So Don Koshmider was sentenced Monday to a minimum of 13 months in prison. I don't know whether they're acting like, oh, I guess that's all he's going to do. The sentencing comes after his business called Best Cadillac Provisions was raided last year after police say he sold to informants 3 separate times. From what I understand, one of these informants, like I was saying earlier, was somebody that had a heroin charge, heroin possession perhaps, and they used him as a confidential informant to get the guy running a dispensary, apparently above board because this was raided by the state police. And I don't think anybody in the local area had any problems with what he was doing. Koshmider said he's a medical marijuana patient. He's innocent. And really what they did is they said, okay, yeah, he sold to these 3 people, and they had med cards, sure, but according to the Michigan law, that the medical marijuana program that we have in Michigan that we live under today, there is no provision in there for people to sell to people that aren't their patients. So there's not, so it's illegal to provide for somebody that isn't your patient, which is totally bullshit. It's a misinterpretation of a gray area, which I'll give them that. It is a gray area. But to say that just because they don't explicitly lay out case-by-case scenarios where somebody that has medical marijuana might provide it to somebody who has a medical marijuana card but don't have medical marijuana but needs it, then everything is illegal. Every kind of transaction is illegal. That is just bullshit. I guess the state had a chance back then to legislatively fix it, but they didn't. They sat on it for over, 8 to 10 years before they finally started working on a plan. And then the plan that they're working on is a corrupt system set up to just let heavily moneyed and connected people step in and take over all the manufacturing and distribution. Koshmider says the law doesn't say patients can't sell to other patients. And that's true. That is a straight up truth. I really don't know a lot the details in this case, but my heart goes with this guy should not be in prison. Nobody should be in prison for marijuana. And there's a lot of discussion around this. And I'm going to do a couple of minutes on that. So one of the things I keep seeing people saying is that abrogate marijuana prohibition in Michigan is going to fix all this. I just want to say again, guys, I'm all for it. There's a couple things that you can't do, though. You can't just go out there and act like because your campaign is going to fail that it's everybody else's fault. It starts by kind of acting like your platform should be what everybody signs instead of my legalize, because my legalize is just some kind of another way for the cops to be like, oh, look, a bunch of gray areas and rules that we can bust people for. I don't really see it like that. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go point by point, but I do remember the interview I had with a My Legalized representative, and he said that the police aren't going to be in the My Legalized program or whatever, the regulate like alcohol. they're not going to be kicking your door down and busting you because you had 15 plants instead of 12, and then giving you a felony ticket and carting you off to jail and all that shit. Far as I know, they take, this will be figured out, but whatever. I'm not going to go like I said, I'm not going to point by point try to prove that right or wrong. I really don't care. What I do want to say about that whole competition thing between abrogate and my legalize is that it doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant for there to be a comparison. It's basically like saying, by proving that you have a better platform, that people will sign your petition and not sign my legalize. Well, the problem that you have right now is that they're already almost halfway or more. I think they're past the halfway point on their goal. So it's not like you're going to stop them. I don't even know if you want to stop them. But it just doesn't make sense why you would make this comparison thing. We all can see it. We can read. We know what the rules on my legalize are if you want to read it. If you want to watch my video about it, I pretty much go through everything in it. And furthermore, there's really no, anybody that doubts that if abrogate was to get on the ballot and did get voted into law, it would be the much better thing, and it would overrule a lot of the things that are in my legalize, to be honest, and a lot of the things that are in the state's medical marijuana public acts. So it's never too late for the abrogate, to be honest. But one thing that I do want to say about abrogate is it is a little bit too late to start a petition drive in 2017 for 2018. I don't know if it was a good idea to start a petition drive in September. You do have things where crowds might be at in September, October. There's a little bit of an opportunity. I would expect to see somebody down at the Renaissance Festival until that ends. I mean, you're missing a lot of opportunities by not having this thing start in the spring and extend into summer. I would have found out when the deadline is. Like, hey, when's the deadline? I have to turn them in for them to get qualified, and then be like, okay, you're on the ballot. Maybe give yourself a little breathing room. But the idea that you're going to find a way in the middle of winter, really for the most part, to get all these signatures, you can't just be like, hey, if my legalize didn't work, I guess you guys didn't care about Don Koshmider enough. That can't be, this can't be where we're at, man. So then there's another, the same old school of people that are out there on every message board every time something comes up in Michigan that want to demonize the medical marijuana program. They want to demonize that these dispensary guys, these guys are just a bunch of drug dealers with a store, and then they talk about all the caregivers, how, these caregivers are just abusing the system. They're out there driving fancy, cars with big rims, and they got all these toys, and they go on all these vacations, and et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen these messages pop up left and right, and they don't even stop there, man. These fucking people are so ruthless that they throw the patients under the bus. There's so many of these. You guys got to admit now, how many people out there, there's so many people out there that just went to get a med card just so they could go get high. Please, man, are you fucking kidding? On that note alone, I just want to tell you trolls that say that shit that, for one, no. There's no way you could say that someone's going to go through all that trouble and pay the money to get a medical marijuana card in Michigan just so they can get high. That's fucking insanity. There was probably the same amount of people, if not more people, got high before medical marijuana became a thing in Michigan. And guess what? They didn't have a card then. I didn't have a card before the fucking program started, but I was getting high. And that's the stupidest fucking argument I've ever heard. Or that they can get high legally. Who cares if you're getting high legally? And on that tip, there's a lot of places in Michigan, over a dozen or 2 dozen, I think, municipalities that I know of that have decriminalized possession of marijuana. So you won't even get busted for walking around town with an ounce or so in your hand. You can smoke weed pretty much everywhere where, it isn't going to raise too many eyebrows. So that's already a thing, dude. Like, I don't know why this argument's still floating around out there, throwing patients under the bus, acting like they don't have real ailments. Well, one final thing on that is no matter how recreational you think you are when it comes to consuming cannabis, it's all medicinal because you're putting medicine into your body. And the definition of medicine is pretty fucking clear. I think I'm going to read it before this clip's over because somebody mentioned it. But yeah, give me a break, man. Throwing patients under the bus, throwing caregivers under the bus. The one thing I got to say about that is there's some bad players in every fucking industry. I think I've said this before. Oh, no, there's not, Brandon. And there's good people. Like, look at the Catholic Church. That's all good, right? No, it ain't. It's not all good. You know why, too. It's not all good. There's bad players. There's bad actors everywhere. There's bad cops. There's bad politicians. There's bad pastors and priests. There's bad coaches. So don't give me this shit about bad actors who are running dispensaries or who are doing this or that. I know Don Koshmider is not a bad actor. I met the guy once. I feel bad that I didn't sit down and have a longer conversation with him. But he's a very, to me, selfless person that wasn't really out there, trying to do anything. And he was a big-time activist who actually got in the face of the cops. Like I feel I'm doing dangerous enough stuff doing this channel and talking all this shit that I talk here. But really, he was right in their faces on the ground with signs and bullhorns and all that shit, just telling them how it really is. And on that note, I've heard people apparently, I don't know, I'm not going to name names, but I've seen a message board where there was a conversation going on and somebody was like, yeah, I live in the same neighborhood as Don lived. And, talking about him doing this and that and whatever. This sounds like somebody that just didn't like medical marijuana. And even if they did, maybe they just didn't like the way somebody else was doing it and whatever. Well, now there's going to be regulations and there's going to be all this new shit going on. And this stuff's still going to be happening. So, while you might not like Don Koshmider because of what he did in your neighborhood. But these people that did this to him, they're running the show now. You have the cop that arrested him, Bailey. He's on the fucking medical marijuana licensing board. So, and he's going to be picking people to start up dispensaries in that area or whatever. And then you're going to have to deal with those people. And not all of them are going to be good people. And it's not because of marijuana brings in bad people into things. Every industry, every business plan there is has potential for bad people to get in there and do whatever the fuck they want. Simple fact of life, man. So, where I fall on this, man. I wish all the best to Don, talking about trying to get out of prison as soon as possible, being up for parole in like 10 months or so or whatever. Whatever the case is, I hope the best for Don, and this is some fucked up shit, and also for Chad Morrow, who's about to go up on his court cases for the raids at his dispensary. We wish everybody the best. I just noticed while I was making this video that Chad went live on Facebook, and I was almost going to stop to watch it, but I feel so bad that I can't contribute to Chad's legal fees. Because to be quite honest, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you do know that I am still recovering from getting fucking everything I own, not everything I own, but all my all my crops at the time stolen, including a crop that was in jars and then a crop that just got cut down that was on racks, another crop that was in the process of getting cut down, and a crop that wasn't even ready to cut down yet. 4 crops, just right out, me and my patients. all of who have been suffering this this crazy ass shit that is a life changing experience for me, really. But if I didn't have to do that, yeah, I would basically pull together all the money I could and try to send it to Chad. I really hope I could send him something. I don't know, man. If anybody here can put a link to that. Yeah, I gotta take a quick note here. All right. So I just wrote a reminder to put a link for Chad Morrow's fundage page for donations to him. And if anybody could donate to his legal fees, and if you want to read more about his story, you can Google that. He's rated, I believe he was rated 2 times. I first found out about Chad at the Hash Bash, where he spoke right after getting out of jail from the raid that happened earlier this year. And he's in Gaylord. So this is all northern Michigan, whereas down here in Flint and below, I haven't really heard of any raids, just the Detroit ordinance raids that are ongoing and have already decimated the dispensary market down there. That's where we are in Michigan. In California, this is going on. Yep. Non-compliant growers. Oh, man. So regulations, if you're a Republican, you're like, no, regulations are bad. But if you're a Republican and someone says, hey, you want to make some regulations for marijuana laws? Oh, yeah, we love those. And they're so bad that people are going to get raided. They're growing their little home grows. Sometime before Labor Day holiday, heavily armed. I don't know. I looked for an update on this story. I couldn't find it. So maybe we won't hear anything about this until Tuesday or whatever. But, this is what I got today. Heavily armed and highly trained law enforcement officers will fan out across Sacramento, California's capital city and the main center of commerce and culture in the state's vast Central Valley. Following elite cops from the Sacramento Police Department's SWAT team will be an army of rulebook and paperwork wonks. Building inspectors and code enforcement officers. Oh, come on. And I always say, why is cannabis the one place where when the code violations happen, you have to have the police there to take you away with SWAT and take you to prison and give you felonies and shit? No other business is it like that. And, when it comes to limits, nobody enforces the limit on how much beer you can grow every year. Or not grow, but manufacture for personal use, which I believe is somewhere around like 600 gallons or some shit. I don't know. You don't see them out there enforcing that. They don't even care who's making their own beer, to be honest. And then, it's just ridiculous. There's no other place where the code enforcers would come out there with the fucking cops and kick your door in just because they suspect you're doing something wrong. And they usually don't pay for the door later if you weren't. Sacramento Bee is reporting this is a dream team that city leaders are sending out into the world to suss out illegal marijuana grows. One size raids all approach that will snare both cartel-connected traffic rings as well as home grows, and a few plants are a few square feet too big and ergo out of code compliance. That's ridiculous. Marijuana legalization has meant that since election night last year, it's perfectly legal for all Californians aged 21 and over to possess up to an ounce of cannabis and cultivate up to 6 plants in their homes. Medical marijuana patients are allowed more plants and more cannabis in their personal possession. And commercial cannabis activity, including many, many more plants and pounds of pot, is also legal, provided the operators acquire permits and pay fees. You shouldn't have to worry about getting your fucking door kicked in with cops holding guns on people's heads just because you didn't pay your fee or your permit isn't for the right shit. Or they should always have a way to fucking do this without worrying about getting arrested. I mean, first of all, you start by making it so it's not overburdensome for people to comply. But in almost the 10 months since, authorities in law enforcement and government have set rules so strict or set fees so high as to render legalization irrelevant or unworkable, or in Sacramento's case, taking an approach skewed so heavily towards the carceral that it sends a clear message. Marijuana legalization is a right you use at your own risk. Some communities have passed laws requiring fees or permit inspections before 6-plant homegrowns can be planted. Come on, man. It's just some people growing 6 plants at their fucking house. Others have suggested charging would-be homegrowers for commercial-grade water hookups costing tens of thousands of dollars. You can't make that kind of shit mandatory. Not everybody needs that kind of shit. If you're just growing 6 plants, man, give me a break. Sacramento's plan presents a different conundrum. Someone growing a few big plants runs the risk of having the SWAT team called in by a neighbor, but the chilling effect will be the same. People will buy their cannabis at a dispensary, thank you very much, and avoid the unwelcome visit. Yeah, well, not everybody wants to do that. According to Joe Devlin, head of the city's new Office of Cannabis Policy, there's as many as 1,000 illegal growing operations in Sacramento. Give me a break. I guess we didn't really legalize marijuana, and again, abrogate, they got a good point, because, you really just need to get rid of prohibition. But all of this is kind of irrelevant if the federal government doesn't take marijuana off of the CSA as well. So whether those are grows slightly out of compliance, medical grows with expired paperwork, or outright ongoing criminal enterprises is unclear and ultimately irrelevant. For the grows, at least, all are lumped into the same smart pot with the end goal clear, eradication. Sounds like something we would have done in a foreign country, right? This approach mirrors others taken across the state, which some growers and cannabis advocates are warning is an existential threat to legalization. The whole point of going legit and exiting the black market was to have authorities on your side. To end the war on drugs and bring some once renegade growers out of the shadows, regulate and tax. That whole thing. Try to think of an analogy here. Code enforcement goes out to make sure your bathroom follows zoning laws if the kitchen is in the restaurant is clean, or to verify that the mod on your car is street legal. If it isn't, then a fine is assessed and a corrective action is prescribed. The car isn't seized, the bathroom isn't removed, and the restaurant isn't demolished. Yet it appears that that's the plan of attack for wayward marijuana grows. Choosing SWAT teams to handle this pencil neck job is a display of particularly delicious but surely unintentional irony. SWAT teams were pioneered in the 1960s Los Angeles, where future police chief Daryl Gates gave military veterans on his force military-style weapons and tactics and deployed them to quell riots, race riots, racial uprisings, we'll actually call them. These are the kinds of cops you're glad to have on your side when the job is apprehending El Chapo Guzman. That's not the job that these teams are now being called to do. Instead, they go on a no-knock drug raids of civilian homes where the greatest threat on premise is the SWAT team itself. Or it would be ironic if the underlying message, it is far too brutal and clumsy to be called subliminal, wasn't clear. You may live in a time of legalization, but think twice before you act like it. And again, High Times just grabbed this story from somebody else, it sounds like, right? Legit. Yeah, we don't need the raids, man. That's like one of the main things. We should band together and put together an initiative somewhere. Try it in Michigan to disband all drug enforcement apparatuses in the state, because it's proven time and time again that they are ineffective, complete garbage. Spending all those resources to put Don Koshmider in prison? Are you fucking kidding me? This is getting ridiculous, man. It's hard to believe. And in Hawaii, anti-marijuana bureaucrat profits from selling medical marijuana. It's kind of confusing article. I'm going to read right through it. Keith Comida, the former anti-marijuana crusader, is now chief compliance officer for a medical marijuana dispensary. Kier Ahoa addressed Hawaii's Act 230 Medical Cannabis Legislative Oversight Working Group held at Hawaii's state capitol on August 23, 2017. Keith Comida worked for the Hawaii Department of Public Safety from 1986 to 2015. During most of his career, he worked for the Narcotics Education Division, or Enforcement Division. Comida received a BS in Criminal Justice from Chaminade University in 1982 and graduated from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy in Quantico, Virginia in 1997. Unlike most other states, Hawaii's medical marijuana program was placed under the Narcotics Enforcement Division, not the Department of Health. Processing paperwork was slow and inefficient. Comida asserted in 2010 that young people were abusing the program. The program never even had a dispensary. Whoa. I don't know what just happened. All right, anyway. He said that there's a question of whether it serves enough of them to be in the program. Comida asserted that many doctors did not care about health issues. Quote, "We have physicians in Hawaii who do this just as a business." And that's another thing that you're doing when you try to say that people in Michigan's medical marijuana program or anywhere else didn't really have an ailment. They just went in there faking something to get a fucking med card so they could get high or get high legally. That's some dumb shit, but you're also throwing all these doctors under the bus saying that they would risk their whole practice just to give one fucking fake recommendation for medical marijuana. Give me a break. There is one problem. Then there is the problem of crime. Quote, "You bring in crime with dispensaries," he said, as opposed to the criminal black market when dispensaries are not allowed to exist. So I don't know, maybe he just liked the black market better. According to West Hawaii Today, Comida stated that just 2% of the current patients suffer from cancer and other debilitating ailments the program is intended to target. He says marijuana is also prescribed for patients complaining of headaches, pain, wearing high heels, dry skin, insomnia, and other ailments. So what? Those are all things that you could probably get fucking over-the-counter aspirin or even Vicodins for, you fucker. And by the way, let me just remind you that these guys didn't even have a fucking medical marijuana dispensary when he's making all these statements. These people are just trying to get some protection from the government from getting arrested for using medicine. Katima warned that for every dollar raised by taxing medical marijuana, the government would be forced to spend $4 for social services and addiction treatment. That is the biggest bullshit there ever was. And as you've seen with social services, nobody on social services smokes weed. I mean, that's just what I'm going to use your own data. All the states, there's been like Florida, Indiana, Michigan, Alabama, Kentucky, all these fucking places I'm talking about. They had this thing where they were mandatorily testing anybody that had been receiving some kind of form of public assistance. And if you come up positive for any drugs, then you wouldn't get your welfare check or food stamps or whatever the fuck they were trying to hold over your head. And in all of these states, the success rate was shit. They found out that basically nobody burned that drug test. And especially marijuana. Because marijuana stays in your system for like 30 fucking days. So they were expecting to snarl a lot of people for marijuana, like they always do with drug tests. And then they would have been like, "Oh, look at all these lazy stoners sucking off this fucking public tit." Yeah, well, that didn't happen. That's not the case. And now, instead of fucking going out there and saying that, which they can't do because they don't have numbers to back it up, all of a sudden, you don't hear them out there saying that fucking, "Oh, I guess everybody that's on public assistance, I guess you can't blame marijuana for that because no one tested positive for marijuana in all these mandatory drug tests that we did for people on welfare." Why don't they fucking say it? Why don't they admit, "Oh, hey, look, we have some data that supports something that they're saying"? No, they're not going to fucking do that. So anyway, this is total horse shit about spending $4 for social services for every dollar you raised by taxing medical marijuana. Fuck off. The medical marijuana program was transferred from the Department of Public Safety to the Department of Health in 2013. Boy, finally, huh? Keith Katima testified against industrial hemp in 2014. Are you fucking kidding? How can you testify against hemp? He said, I cannot support Senate Bill 2175 SD2 as written that would authorize the Dean of the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources of the University of Hawaii at Manoa to establish a 2-year industrial hemp remediation and biofuel research program. So he wasn't even against the current thing that happened recently where Hawaii wanted to vote for hemp to legalize it for everybody to grow as an industrial crop. Instead, he decided to go against it when it was just going to be a research crop at a university. What a fucker. And, you know, what did he want to say? He wanted to say that there was THC in hemp somehow. He's just full of shit, dude. And even if there was, there's not enough of it to matter. But whatever, man. This guy is just a total fucking sham. Katima had his share of run-ins with the law. Oh, really? In 2002, he was accused of misusing funds. In 2003, the state agreed to pay nearly $2 million to settle his sexual harassment and discrimination claims. So we keep electing and putting these assholes into power that do this kind of shit, and then they get to sit there and fucking point their fingers at people for marijuana. State Narcotics Enforcement Division head Keith Katama was found to be personally liable. So why didn't he get fucking fired? Why is he still talking? Why he should have went to jail for that. That cost him $2 million for that sexual harassment shit and discrimination claim that he was definitely liable for. He still gets a fucking job? When the Department of Health became the overseer of the medical marijuana program, it took time for the Department of Public Safety to transfer funds as it was revealed that Koshmider had mishandled and commingled funds. That should have landed him in prison. Why? You know, if you've seen somebody mishandling some marijuana funds, like in Colorado, say like somebody in Colorado, like for some reason they had a way that they could fuck with the money that was going into the coffers that was going to be used for reasons that they said it was going to be used for the medical marijuana, or not medical marijuana, but the marijuana taxes and what it was going to do for Colorado. If someone was in there mishandling and commingling those funds, they would have been hung from the highest fucking tree and burned at the stake and all that shit, and the whole program would have been handed over to Jeff Sessions so he could go bust everybody. But, you know, when somebody like this, when one of these prohibition type fuckers that sexually harasses people at work and, you know, this disgusting bullshit, mishandling funds, all this shit he's done, he's still in power. What the fuck? This is terrible. Why he passed medical marijuana law in 2000 and allowed its first dispensaries to open in late 2017. Do you think he was partially responsible for that disparity in like 17 years of no dispensaries? It was feared that one or more people who did not qualify for medical marijuana might try to get marijuana from a dispensary, and therefore, until medical marijuana dispensaries became safely operated, medical marijuana patients were forced to resort to the black market for 17 years. You guys are fucking idiots over there letting this guy stick around. And he had everything to do with that. Yeah, so I simply just cannot believe all that shit. Nevada Tax Commission again says no to liquor distributors in the marijuana fight. The Nevada Tax Commission on Tuesday dealt another blow to liquor distributors, hoping to hold a monopoly on the distributing retail marijuana throughout the state. Tax commissioners voted to uphold a determination by the Nevada Tax Department that there are not enough licensed liquor distributors to properly serve the state's recreational marijuana market. Lawyers for the alcohol distributors argued that the August 10th meeting in which the department decided to license beyond alcohol distributors did not give them proper due process to argue their case and force them into appeal the department's decision. Quote, there was no opportunity to question anything being presented in the meeting, said Kevin Benson, attorney for the group of alcohol distributors. There was no way to get to the bottom of any of those things. You know, you guys still haven't made a good case as to why you think you could do this and why you think you deserve this monopoly and how this is going to be totally like okay with the feds that have to license you for being alcohol distributors. Okay, they have fought months to gain monopoly on the commercial marijuana deliveries for the first 18 months of retail sales. You're already losing. We're almost like 3 months in. Those distributors argue that such a monopoly was given to them by the recreational marijuana legalization law voters approved in November. But the Nevada Tax Department and the marijuana industry have argued that there are not enough delivery options, leading to lower product counts and lost sales. And I don't understand how they get the delivery thing. Like, first of all, I don't like this. You need these secure transporters mandated by law and all this other shit. Like, man, if someone feels the need to get armored car services, then they'll get it. Otherwise, if they don't feel the need for it, then they shouldn't have to be fucking forced. So this is another one of those Republican-based regulations that's some kind of a giveaway to somebody. They're trying to give this shit to the liquor drivers arounders. This doesn't seem like they deserve it, in my opinion. Currently, 6 marijuana distributors are licensed in Nevada. Those companies have 29 transport vehicles across the state. But it is unclear how many of those vehicles are operating now, the tax department said. But the decision upheld Tuesday does not mean the fight is over. Alcohol distributors have appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court to overturn the judge's decision to not uphold an injunction that would have stopped the tax department from giving licenses to entities other than alcohol distributors. Man, they're really mad that they just can't take the whole thing. It's like, dude, just take what you can get. What's the big fucking worry? And then as soon as you say you're going to do it all, the feds are going to come in and crack down. That's just some kind of a subtle way to shut the whole thing down. Like, oh yeah, let's get the liquor drivers. They'll have the whole monopoly on it. And then when the feds say, oh, we got to pull you guys' licenses for driving liquor because we found out you were driving weed around town. Oh, and then they're going to be like, no, we won't drive the weed anymore. We'll only drive the liquor because we make way more money driving liquor around than we ever make driving weed around, which is probably true, so that's exactly what they would do, just like those pharmacies in Uruguay. They're just like, oh, we'll just stop with the weed and do what we normally do. If the liquor drivers, distributors, if they get the whole monopoly and then the feds shut them down, or they shut down because they don't want to get shut down for alcohol driving, then nobody can drive it around. You know, can you see the fucking problem here? Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on September 6th. I'm sure that's the Supreme Court of Nevada. And a couple of stories coming out of this control board over here in Massachusetts. So, you know, Massachusetts, nobody in the government of Massachusetts, and that includes the Republican, that includes all the Democrats. None of these politicians like legalizing marijuana. They hate it. They want to make new rules. They want to fucking make it more restrictive. They want to do all kinds of things to make it shitty. They've already delayed sales for 6 months on top of the already long startup time that it was having, that it's going to have. So legal sales probably ain't going to be a thing until sometime in like July of 2018 if we're lucky. A spokesman for the Yes on 4 group behind the ballot question legalize marijuana in Massachusetts says he's concerned after 4 of the 5 appointees to the new Cannabis Control Commission opposed the measure. So again, you got prohibitionists sitting on the board making the rules for marijuana. This is getting fucking ridiculous, guys. All right. You got former cops in Michigan sitting on these kind of boards. Now you got people over here. We'll see about these people. Massachusetts passed Question 4, which broadly legalized marijuana for ages 21 and up by 54 to 46% vote. The Cannabis Control Commission does not reflect the Massachusetts electorate. Jim Borgasani, the spokesman for the Yes on 4, told reporters on Friday after the remaining members of the commission were announced. During the campaign, proponents said legalization will provide new revenue to the state while driving down the black market, while opponents argue that the ballot question was flawed and written as a giveaway to the new marijuana industry. Simply not the case. In fact, they get to write the rules, so they can decide on how that works. But now the same people that said that bullshit are the ones that's going to write the rules. The Cannabis Control Commission will oversee the retail marijuana shops and the medical marijuana program, which is getting rolled under their control from the State Department of Public Health. I'm not sure if that's the best idea in the world, but it's better than giving it to the police, the law enforcement people, or whatever it was in Hawaii, like the justice people. Just one of the 5 members voted yes on question 4. She has helped co-write it. Shailene Title, co-founder of cannabis recruiting firm THC Staffing Group. The other 4 members voted no. They were the chairman, Stephen Hoffman, former state senator Jen Flanagan, former Department of Public Health official Kay Doyley, and former Assistant Attorney General Britt McBride. Their no votes mean they voted against the creation of the positions they now hold. Quote, it would be reassuring to have statements from each of the people who voted no that they would in no way let their personal position affect their work, Borgasani said. That would make us feel a little more comfortable. Borgasani also voiced a fear of additional delays of the medical regulatory structure, or the marijuana regulatory structure that the commission is tasked with assembling. Quote, we already had 6-month delay in Massachusetts, he said, referring to the state legislators passing a law that pushed the opening of retail pot shops from January 2018 to July of 2018. We don't want any more delays. Governor Charlie Baker and lawmakers said the delay was necessary in order to rewrite the flawed law passed by voters. In the rewrite, the commission was made more independent instead of directly under the treasurer's office, and its membership expanded from 3 to 5. Now, it's funny, they said that, what did they just say? Oh, we need time to rewrite this flawed laws that the voters passed. All right, so they did that in the 2017 session, so they didn't need more time. They were going to do that in the 2017 session anyway. And they could have had all this shit figured out and have pot shops open in 2018 in January, not July. But that was on them, you know. Them saying that they needed so much more time because they got to sit there and haggle out, you know, these new changes. Well, they did the haggling out of the changes. A lot of the changes that they wanted to do, you know, weren't going to fly. But they wanted to push it, and they pushed and pushed and pushed. They pushed, and it was Democrats that were pushing, and just like Republicans that were pushing for things like lower plant counts for home grow, lower possession amounts, and shit, just making it more restrictive. Early in the release announcing the selection of Doyle and Title, Baker said, executing the duties of the commission responsibly is vital to the safety, laying the groundwork for this new industry in the Commonwealth, whatever that means. Borgasini praised Title, the one commission member with experience in the nascent marijuana industry. I know Shailene. I think she's a wonderful pick for this board, and I think she'll do a good job making sure everybody is rowing in the same direction. Let's hope so. I think she has a lot more credentials than these articles are giving us. But, yeah, let's see. The board includes Hoffman, a legalization opponent who has no background in the marijuana industry and was tapped yesterday by Treasurer Deb Goldberg to be the commission's chair. Now, he's also a former Bain & Company executive. The commission faces a tight deadline to hire staff and create regulations before next April, and applications will begin flowing into the states for first recreational marijuana dispensaries. Then they'll need to vet candidates. So Bain was this company, you might remember Mitt Romney famously was the head of it for a while. And what they used to be famous for was going in to failing companies, failing manufacturing companies mainly, big companies, medium-sized companies. They would go in there, buy the company out, and overinvest it, crash the company out with debt burden. Shares would fall through the floor, and then they would just scrap it. So that's what they were good at. Is that what they want to do to this program? Britt McBride, who also voted against legalizing marijuana last November, also headed the AG's Policy and Government Division and was tapped by the AG. This guy here was a deputy counsel at the Department of Public Health, where she was the top in-house lawyer for the state's medical marijuana program. She voted against legalization, according to the Treasurer's office, citing concerns with the ballot initiative. They all had concerns with it. They were worried that this board that they now sit on was going to have too much power to make rules. And now that they're sitting on it, they can make the rules that they want instead of, rules that might make the program actually work. So Shaleen Title, co-founder of THC Staffing Group, a cannabis recruiting firm, who was another joint selection announced today. Title helped write the marijuana legalization referendum voters passed last November and is a founding board member of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. All right, and then Jennifer Flanagan, who resigned her seat in the state Senate after Baker picked her for the board earlier this month. Flanagan, who is a co-chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse, voted against legalization and has a degree in mental health counseling. Healy, who's required to make a selection with the public safety background, praised McBride as bringing vast experience to the panel. Her knowledge and expertise in public safety, rule writing, and government transparency will be an asset to the commission in the state as this new industry is launched in Massachusetts. Well, all we can do is see the commission's 4 members will make $120,000 a year. Hoffman, as chair, will make $161,000 under the state statute. Good luck with all that, Massachusetts. We'll see how it goes. So the DOJ, not happy with being neutered. They're using the IRS to investigate Colorado marijuana businesses. So I guess now they just think of everybody as like Al Capone. And if we can't get them on just marijuana charges, maybe we can get them for tax evasion. The U.S. Department of Justice is secretly using the IRS to conduct criminal investigations into otherwise legitimate marijuana businesses in Colorado under the guise of tax audits. Lawyers for the companies say in an ongoing federal lawsuit. The IRS called the allegations baseless and illogical, saying inquiries it is making for information from Colorado's Marijuana Enforcement Division are simply part of its efforts at verifying financial records and determining if businesses owe more tax. The case in the U.S. District Court, filed by the owners of Rifle Remedies, a medical marijuana business in Silt, is one of several that challenge IRS subpoenas to Med seeking information about how much pot they've grown, to whom they've sold it, and when. The IRS said it has resorted to the tactic because its businesses have refused to offer information voluntarily. Though properly licensed in Colorado to sell the drug in view of the IRS, the companies are traffickers that violate the Federal Controlled Substances Act that lists marijuana as an illegal narcotic. As As such, the businesses cannot deduct expenses and other companies can, but before the agencies can make that assessment, it must first determine that companies are actually selling pot. So let me get this right. You guys are trying to take money from them like hand over fist, seeing if they're paying enough taxes, telling them that they can't do any deductions for anything because they're an illegal business, but then saying, well, you know what? Maybe you're trying to take those anyway, and we're going to do an investigation to make sure you're not taking it. That's what's going on so far. Filings in the Rifle Remedies case allege a deeper conspiracy involving at least 3 federal agencies. Lawyers for the companies did not immediately return messages, but have said in recent court filings that they suspect the IRS is overstepping its auditing authority by conducting investigations for the DOJ. They claim the DEA has trained tax agents on how to investigate drug operations. The IRS is working jointly with the Department of Justice to investigate purported criminal activities of the taxpayers. The lawyers, Greenwood Village attorneys James Thornburn and Richard Walker, wrote in a recent filing. To this end, the IRS has converged on Colorado and is conducting mass audits of those it determined to be unlawfully trafficking in controlled substances, dishing out summonses like candy. They say their clients would be happy to give the IRS what it wants, but only with a grant of immunity from prosecution. And that's where we could start. It's solutions like that can start to solve all these conflicts between the feds and the people in Colorado and other places where it's legal. And Uruguay, and the Patriot Act. Like, let's stop acting like people doing above the ground work is doing illegal shit. So I guess, like I said, with abrogate prohibition and everybody else that has good intentions with marijuana legalization and whatever it might be, regulations, none of it matters if the federal government still considers it a fucking crime. So we need to get it out of the CSA, guys. The DEA and IRS held training sessions in March 2016 where IRS agents were trained in criminal drug law enforcement investigator techniques, but efforts to learn what actually transpired have been rebuffed. The depths of the IRS and DOJ joint effort is shrouded in secrecy, they wrote. Noting responses to their requests under the Federal Freedom of Information Act have been repeatedly stalled. The lawyers assert that the conduct is a result of a 2016 law in which Congress prohibited the use of DOJ funds to prevent implementation of state medical marijuana laws. So because the DEA can't conduct such an investigation, it is working through the IRS in the U.S. Treasury Department. The IRS, DEA, and MED do not comment on pending litigation and will not confirm the existence of any investigation. The IRS called the assertion baseless, saying Rifle Remedies appears to sell marijuana for recreational use and that the DEA doesn't need help. That the DEA is using the IRS to investigate defies common sense. No, it don't. If the fucking DEA can't because their hands are tied because of the Cole memo or whatever else, then that's pretty much it. If you're saying that Rifle is selling recreational marijuana, that's your word against theirs. The DEA doesn't need to investigate that, but if Colorado's police investigated it and everything looks fine, then we can make the designation there. The government said in the court filing, if prosecution were truly the goal, it would be far simpler and likely more effective for the DEA to send a plainclothes agent to purchase marijuana from Rifle Remedies. So he's not even talking about what I just said. But what he's saying, no, they don't have the funds to do that. The DEA, plainclothes agent, purchased marijuana from Rifle Remedies, then to co-opt the IRS into issuing summons to Med for information about past year's marijuana sales. Rifle's underlying theory of this case lacks not only evidence, but logic. You keep saying that, but just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. Like, you said that 3 times now, and I still see the logic. The logic is the fucking DEA doesn't have the funds to fucking do this stupid bullshit you're talking about. The IRS is trying to get its hands on Colorado's Marijuana Enforcement Tracking Reporting Compliance System, or METRIC, which follows every marijuana plant from seed to sale. The agency wants annual gross sales report from 2014 to 2015, but apparently also information about who is buying from Rifle Remedies. Till now, the IRS relied on pot businesses, growers, distributors, manufacturers to concede that they are selling the drug, which the lawyers say is at tantamount to admitting to a federal crime. Once done, the IRS uses Section 280E of the Revenue Code in denying any business tax deduction, a move that raises the business's tax bill by multiples. And it also makes it so, if you're paying taxes, you don't get any deductions, period. Not even talking about like depreciation or whatever business expenses. Businesses are able to deduct their costs of producing goods from revenues generated just like other businesses can, but cannot do more than that, a massive liability that leaves them with huge tax bills that the IRS has no problem sweeping up. No hearings are set in this case. Unbelievable. That's all I got to say about that. Two stories. Indiana, Republican, the Republican Party itself are actually warming up to potential legalization of medical marijuana. So we're talking about Republican Representative Jim Lucas, who's planning to introduce a piece of legislation in the upcoming session designed to put fully functional medical marijuana law on the books. Apparently liberals don't like the guy because he made some comments about how women need to learn how to not be rape victims, and yeah, that set social media on fire there for a minute. So the lawmaker has apparently spent the summer speaking to people in his district about cannabis, the cannabis issue. Learning about the herb has helped them live better, more productive lives. He recently told the Indie Channel that the state's legislature has a responsibility to at least investigate it and determine the facts. And if there is something positive out there, we have to pursue that. In addition, the bill Lucas plans to get behind, Democratic Representative Sue Arrington also planned to submit a medical marijuana proposal for consideration in the 2018 session. Arrington attempted to push a similar measure through in early 2017, but like almost every other piece of pot-related legislation filed in the state capitol over the years, it did not receive a hearing. Over the weekend, both Lucas and Arrington appeared at a town hall meeting hosted by the Indiana chapter of NORML. Speaking in front of a crowd of about 100 people, the two lawmakers agreed that medical marijuana was no longer a partisan issue in the Hoosier state. Quote, "It's not a Republican or Democrat thing, liberal or conservative. This is a human rights issue," Lucas said. According to Fox 59, quote, "We've seen proof that it works. We've heard personal testimony from people who have personally benefited from this product, and I'm for it 100%. So Arrington, who is one of only a few Indiana lawmakers to support the marijuana movement in recent years, told those in attendance that it was great to finally have some support from the party that has spent most sessions ignoring the cause. Up until now, it has mostly been Democratic voices, and we're a minority in the Indiana State House, so to have someone come out as strongly as Representative Lucas has is really great to have a partner who wants to work with those of us who have been in the trenches. Although Indiana has not exactly been in a hurry to put more progressive drug policies to work, the state did just legalize a restrictive medical marijuana program for patients with epilepsy." So anyway, there's one place, one positive sign, and here's another. We'll just watch this video, I guess. Tennessee governor candidate, Republican, who is coming around to legalizing medical marijuana. Now, I always say this about Republicans, whether it's gay rights or marijuana or whatever, unless it's about gun control or gun rights, they don't want you to have any rights. Unless they've personally have had an experience with something, like they've had to get an abortion or something, whatever it is. They don't come around unless they actually have had experience or somebody right next to them.
Beth Harwell has a sister who lives in Colorado who injured her back doing yoga.
She was prescribed opioids. She would need to be on them for 12 weeks. She was in a body brace. And she really realized that after a couple of days of usage that she would be addicted if she didn't take an alternative course of action.
So her sister, who is very health conscious and doesn't do any drugs, asked her husband to go to the dispensary and get her some.
Did not smoke it, just put a little bit on her tongue mixed with some coconut oil. And it really got her through some tough days, and she's not doing anything right now. She's not on any type of medicine right now. So, it is an alternative for some folks.
Speaker Harwell said her sister used it only 3 or 4 days and is now living pain-free thanks to the controversial plant. Medical marijuana isn't FDA approved yet, so she tells me they'd have to put strict restrictions in place to make sure it's processed correctly.
This is going to take a while. This is first and foremost an educational process to educate the public, and then we're going to have to get the medical community involved to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the patients and the people of the state of Tennessee.
Are all members in favor vote aye when the bell rings? Those opposed vote no.
After the bill died last session, Speaker Harwell ordered a task force to look into the effects of medical marijuana. Lawmaker Jeremy Faison has said he plans on reintroducing the bill again next year.
That bill
In
was
Nashville,
kind
Lauren
of
Davis,
kind of
Local 8
garbage.
News.
The hallmark of that bill is that there was no smokable marijuana, no bud smoking. So I don't know what this here is. If you're not selling smokable bud, there's really no point in trimming it. You're just going to churn all that shit into oil or whatever. So, you know, like, I'm kind of glad that we're seeing Republicans come around finally, but they will eventually because this fucking issue is overwhelmingly supported by the public. Medical marijuana? Are you fucking kidding? Everybody pretty much is like, yeah, medical marijuana, why is that illegal? Even fucking Trump. Real quick, New York board rules that taxi drivers are allowed to use medical marijuana. Nothing in here I really care about reading. You know, just interesting story. Nice to know. Just remember that New York is also one of those places where their medical marijuana program is super restrictive. There's an article again, and I did a story about a year ago about how they expanded the program. But you don't expand a medical marijuana program until you say, yeah, you can smoke bud. Then the program will fucking expand. Until then, your program is shit. So I guess you can use your chives and creams and whatever other form of cannabis is allowed under the Compassionate Care Act. I guess I need to read this one. The decision would likely soften any zero-tolerance policies held by employers in New York and possibly other states with legal cannabis laws in place. They act like it's a big deal, but really, you're going to not let people smoke weed still. It ain't like this means, yeah, the taxi driver can just blaze up and then go pick somebody up for a fucking fare. But the ruling does come after TLC revoked a taxi driver's license in July because the driver tested positive for pot. The license is required for all taxi drivers to legally operate in the city. So you test positive for pot. That don't even mean you fucking smoked it anywhere near the day that test was done. So we'll see. I mean, this rule, when they do finally say, yeah, smoking weed isn't a big deal, this rule will still be important. In health news, we have a good report to give you about cannabis treating schizophrenia and Tourette syndrome. Now, you might be like, what? I thought it made schizophrenia worse or whatever. Well, just remember that everything you've learned about cannabis is all bullshit, man. There's no studies that's ever been done about marijuana leading to schizophrenia. Not a single fucking study ever. All that correlative study shit that's out there is just designed to try to make you think that they can take some numbers and be like, oh, look, see, you got to believe it because these numbers don't lie. Yeah, but the numbers are full of shit that they had on anything that they call a correlative test before. Let me read it. Despite cannabis history and folk pharmacopoeias, clinical studies of its medicinal impact remain limited in many areas. Based on some promising early results, researchers are now calling for a closer look at its applications for certain mental health conditions for which the more traditional treatments have come up short. And I didn't put it in this week, but we've heard a lot about how ecstasy, MDMA, whatever you want to call it, has been, approved for study for depression and PTSD and all this shit. Everybody's going, oh, yay, such a good thing. Well, to be honest, man, MDMA has always been like somewhere below Schedule 1. And it was always used in medicine for one reason or another. It just hasn't been used for a long time. But the pharmaceutical manufacturers love it because they can make small measured doses and sell it for high prices. That's why you don't hear them talking about how good PTSD can be treated with cannabis. Because they don't like cannabis because they can't fucking control it and make little tiny doses out of it and rip you the fuck off over it. According to recent studies, the cannabis-derived chemical cannabidiol may offer meaningful relief with schizophrenia, a frequently chronic condition which can significantly interfere with how we think, feel, and behave. At the University of Wollongong, researchers first discovered that CBD could provide the new kinds of symptom relief for schizophrenic individuals by examining what science has uncovered about the chemical so far. To get a sense of CBD's impact on cognitive function in relation to schizophrenia, Dr. Katrina Green, Professor Nadia Solowit, and Wallawong PhD candidate Ashley Osborne conducted a detailed review of 27 extant studies on chemical and uncovered some fascinating insights about the potential therapeutic value. In a release, Green commented that CBD could provide direct neurological support for a range of conditions affecting the brain from schizophrenia to dementia. From this review, we found that CBD will not improve learning and memory in healthy brains, but may improve aspects of learning and memory in illnesses associated with cognitive impairment, including Alzheimer's disease, as well as neurological and neuroinflammatory disorders, including hepatic encephalopathy, meningitis, sepsis, and cerebral malaria. So, summary, hey, if your brain is normal, CBD is not going to help you learn your learning or memory abilities there. That's kind of weird. Maybe they need to do a study to check that out too. But they're saying that if your brain is normal, CBD is not really going to help you get super brain power. But if your brain is all fucked up, whether it be from nerve problems or other physical damage that your brain has, CBD can help. Green, who led the review, also noticed that CBD may well be capable of reducing cognitive impairment that has been associated with THC, the main psychoactive component of cannabis, which has previously shown a potential to aggravate aspects of schizophrenia, anxiety, and other mental disorders. So what that means is, whereas THC might, for some reason, trigger some kind of psychotic reaction in people with schizophrenia, anxiety, and other mental disorders, or flare up a fucking anxiety outbreak, or, just feeling anxious in general or having a panic attack from THC alone. Well, if you have CBD mixed with the THC, it can help dampen them effects, which is how paranoia got eliminated as a side effect of weed. Following the review, the researchers decided to put CBD's potential for easing cognitive schizophrenia symptoms to the test with their own study using a rat model. With help from senior professor Zhu-Feng Hung at PhD candidate at Ilawana Babik, what they found was that chronic administration of CBD seemed to attenuate the cognitive deficits and social withdrawal that often afflicts persons with schizophrenia, which the team simulated in rats using prenatal poly-1 C infusion. We found that CBD was able to restore recognition and working memory, as well as social behavior to normal levels, Osborne said in a release. That's fucking huge. That right there sounds really huge. For people that know somebody with schizophrenia, and I am that person, I know two people with schizophrenia, that's huge news, man. Unfortunately, the people I know with schizophrenia, if you told them that the CBD came from marijuana, they probably would automatically not want to do it. Whatever. Anyway, these findings are interesting because they suggest that CBD may be able to treat some of the symptoms of schizophrenia that are seemingly resistant to existing medications. In addition, CBD treatment did not alter body weight or food intake, which are common side effects of antipsychotic drug treatment. Yeah, those antipsychotic drugs that they got are Band-Aids. They basically just numb the brain down to drooling out of your mouth levels, and then you don't have to deal with the schizophrenic person that day because they're basically just numb. Osborne also explained to an ABC News Australia, quote, "This is really important because current antipsychotic drugs don't address the cognitive deficits which approximately 80% of the patients with schizophrenia experience." Yeah, that's a huge side effect of having a main effect of schizophrenia. And if you could treat that with something that doesn't fucking make you just turn into a zombie, and these people can somewhat lead a normal life, that would be fucking amazing. According to the Australian team, the results of their review and study indicate some promising possibilities for treating schizophrenia with CBD, but also the more scientific research is definitely in order. Basically, they're saying we're going down the right path. Please let us continue down the path and give us money. This is the first study to prove cannabidiol can be used to treat symptoms of schizophrenia that aren't addressed by the current medications, Osborne told ABC News. Quote, these findings are really promising, but further research is needed to see if these findings translate to people suffering from schizophrenia. Because remember, these are all rat models. She added, ultimately, we hope that these findings lead to new improved medications. And again, whole plant marijuana is probably the best thing you can go with, and you can find a CBD heavy strain that would pretty much do what you need it to. According to a recent study on schizophrenia and cannabis use, people with a greater risk for schizophrenia are likelier than others to keep trying the plant for themselves in the meantime. As in, people out in the wild without prescriptions and shit are self-medicating with just marijuana that they can find on the street or whatever, you know, and whereas that is kind of a good thing because it works for them, sometimes it might not be good because you never know what they're going to get on the street. Even if you have a good bud tender at a dispensary, you might get something that might not jive with schizophrenia or even anxiety or panic attacks. In recent years, cannabis has shown promise as treatment for Tourette's syndrome, characterized by involuntary physical or verbal tics that are often physically or socially painful to endure. A preliminary study published this year provided a retrospective evaluation of cannabis's effectiveness and tolerability in treating adults with Tourette's syndrome, conducted by researchers at the University of Toronto with support from the Tourette's Association of America. The study found that 18 of 19 participants were at least much improved after a regimen of inhaled cannabis, while tic scores for the whole group decreased by 60%. As Normal reported, all the study's participants experienced clinically significant symptom relief, including reductions in irritability, impulsivity, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive symptoms, and rage outbursts. The drug was also well tolerated by the participants, with mostly minor side effects being reported. Overall, the researchers wrote, these study participants experienced substantial improvements in their symptoms, which is particularly striking given that almost all participants had failed at least one anti-tic medication trial. In conclusion, cannabis seems to be a promising treatment option for tics and associated symptoms. So they were doing another trial where, you know, almost all these participants failed at another trial where they were using some kind of anti-tic medication. And from what I've seen, like any other medical or mental disorder, they generally just throw some fucking benzodiazepines and opioids or whatever they can to try to numb these effects. And a lot of times that's just bullshit. That shit don't work. As Normal pointed out, research has previously determined that oral doses of THC have helped decrease tics and obsessive-compulsive behaviors in patients with Tourette's syndrome by a hearty margin. Patients using inhaled cannabis, however, have generally shown greater overall improvement. Given that cannabis and the chemicals it contains have demonstrated promise or proven effectiveness in treating such ailments as pain, nausea, mental illness, multiple sclerosis, neuropsychiatric disorders, epilepsy, and various symptoms thereof, many patients and practitioners are hoping that the Trump administration will allow more research on the plant going forward. In recent months, however, members of the administration have indicated the desire to rather crack down on the drug's medicinal and recreational uses, at times due to opinion, or perhaps more accurately, the notion that marijuana is not medicine. According to the Merriam-Webster, a medicine is a substance or preparation used in treating disease. According to our own CDC, medicines are, quote, used to treat disease, manage conditions, and relieve symptoms. It does all three, guys. As the CDC points out, medicines can also contain a number of different drugs and thereby pose different health risks depending on each patient. For example, over-the-counter pain medicines like Tylenol and Excedrin contain the drug acetaminophen, which can easily be overdosed on or do real liver damage by doubling the dose once or twice, regardless of the interactions with other drugs, while overdosing or incorrect use of OTCs like Advil or Aleve, which contain drugs called NSAIDs, cause tens of thousands of hospitalizations each year and thousands of deaths though exact estimates vary. Nonetheless, these drugs continue to be available as medicines because their perceived benefits are thought to have outweighed the risks involved in taking them. There's no risks in taking cannabis for any fucking reason, but yet we will get thrown right in prison for fucking having too much of it in possession, even though you can have all the NSAIDs you want. You can have a whole fucking warehouse full of them. This is getting ridiculous, guys, so whatever. So the potential benefits of cannabis would far out risks. The side effects involved, even to warrant further study. In the very least, hopefully our elected officials and appointed administrators will realign their sense of the plant with science's definitions sometime soon. I doubt it. Good people that smoke weed real quick. Does Harrison Ford smoke weed? Now, Green Rush Daily is your go-to source for does this person or that person smoke weed, but I don't really like their selection of people. It's mostly just, maybe I'm wrong, but I dug through their archives just to find Harrison Ford, but it's a lot of trendy, dickweedy kind of people like Lindsay Lohan and freaking Kate Upton, and who the fuck cares about half these people anyway? I guess I'm the outlier because in this dumbass, dumbed down country, seems like a lot more people care about Kate Upton than Harrison Ford even. But I like Han Solo. Does Han Solo smoke weed? Indiana Jones, Han Solo. Who is Harrison Ford, in case you don't know? Harrison Ford, he was born July 13th, 1942 in Chicago. In 1964, he moved to L.A. with an additional voiceover radio job. He wasn't hired for that gig, but decided to stay in L.A. anyway. After bouncing around and doing a few uncredited roles, he eventually decided to take a break from acting and became a carpenter. Like Jesus. All right, Ford was working as a carpenter. Casting director and producer Fred Roos got him an audition with George Lucas for the film American Graffiti. Ford ended up getting the role as Bob Falfa. After working with Lucas on that movie, Ford launched the role of Han Solo in Lucas's Star Wars movie, and that changed everything. Following the work as Han Solo, Ford went on to star as Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones series. Additionally, he played huge roles in other famous movies such as Patriot Game, Clear and Present Danger, The Fugitive, Blade Runner, The Witness, Air Force One, What Lies Beneath, and many more. Ford has won 2 Saturn Awards and 2 People's Choice Awards, as well as the Jules Verne Award in 2006. Additionally, he's received multiple nominations for an Academy Award for Best Actor. Oh man, bummer he didn't never get one, huh? So does Harrison smoke weed or what? From what we can tell, the answer is yes, and here's the proof. So it's just a bunch of hearsay, but let's check it out. In 2008, Ford's co-star Carrie Fisher published a memoir. Fisher wrote about her time playing the role of Princess Leia alongside Ford. In the course of describing their work together, she mentioned getting some fire bud from Ford. In fact, she described the weed Ford gave her as having brutal strength. She said it basically wiped her out. He liked that indica. Decades later, Bill Maher outed Ford as a weed smoker when he spoke at a 2002 Normal event. Apparently, Maher said, "There's a lot of prominent people, I'm not going to mention any names, Harrison Ford, Ted Turner, who smoke a lot of pot and need to stand up. I'm not going to mention names. I never do that." Sure you don't. Anyway, at this point, we got 2 super credible sources who both say the same thing. Yes, Harrison Ford smokes weed. Final hit, does Harrison smoke weed? Although Harrison Ford hasn't really spoken about it himself, we've gotten pretty good reason to believe that he likes getting high. In fact, it sounds like he's an all-out pro who puffs the strongest herb he can find. Okay. So that's that. And that's the fucking show for this week. Look around. I might have a clip or 2 in between podcasts, but for the most part, I don't expect there to be like major stories happening. I could probably do a lot more reporting on what's going on in Michigan, but man, to be honest, I don't think it's going to do much good for me to tell more people about it. I mean, everybody knows what's going on. But if you think I could and you think I should say more shit about what's going on in Michigan, let me know, man. Tell me what I should talk about. I'm always up for suggestions. And that's it for this week. I don't know what else to say, man. To I still feel like I should probably be spending my time doing something better that isn't as risky or whatever, but I still feel very good about doing this show, and I hope people appreciate it. And I know the people that do keep telling me that they appreciate it. Thank you guys for keeping up with the watching and letting people know if they want to know some shit to come and check it out. I'm here doing this shit. Have a good one. Peace out.